Let's go. You're watching TBPN Live. We got a happy day today. It's Thursday, March 20th, 2025. What's
right.
that sound, Jordy? What's that sound? Oh! Oh! This is the energy we're bringing to the show today. Get ready. Technology needed a Greek weather show.
Let's go. And just to be clear, we've been blasting this all morning.
Yeah, all morning.
I don't even know where you got this reference, John, but it's fantastic.
Fantastic. We're live from the Temple of Technology, the Fortress of Finance, the capital of capital. This show starts now. We got a great show for you guys today, folks. Apple is firing people. They're shuffling.
Hey, you're normally good with the transitions, John, but
Yes,
that was a
terrible.
little rough. We went from the craziest high to a very low moment.
Well, we'll find out.
Efficiency is good. Business efficiency.
The headline
is
says
good.
shuffle.
Shuffle.
Could be shuffling out of the organization, could be shuffling into the organization. We're going to find out because Mark Gurman has the exclusive. Apple shuffles AI executive ranks in bid to turn around Siri. Obviously, we've talked about this a lot. No one likes Siri right now, but they have a complete monopoly over the Siri button on your iPhone, and no one's leaving iPhones, so they got to get it together and figure out what product to build. Apple is undergoing a rare shakeup in its executive ranks, aiming to get its artificial intelligence efforts back on track after months of delays and
John,
stumbles.
you know I like to track name popularity in
Oh,
the
yeah.
United States.
Give it to me.
And in 2024, let's see,
Siri. You're thinking Siri?
Yeah, so the name
Okay.
Siri
Yeah,
in
yeah.
1973,
Yeah.
15 babies per million
Okay.
were named Siri. And that peaked in 2008, actually, at 74. So more than quadruple. And now it is back in the depths, back to
Well, it makes sense
actually
to start using the
four-
name again, because if you're bearish on Siri, the product, you think that white space is now available for baby names.
It's a good time to go long.
Exactly.
Siri.
Expect that it'll be replaced. They'll come up with a different brand name. They'll have to refresh. It will
And
become
it'll
the
just be
ping.
fair.
It'll be
A greenfield, blue ocean opportunity
Exactly.
in naming.
Well, CEO Tim Cook has lost confidence in the ability of AI head John Giandrea to execute on product development, so he's moving over another top executive to help Vision Pro creator Mike Rockwell.
I mean,
A little controversial.
uh,
Why are you laughing, Jordy?
I mean, I gotta put.
He's taking risks.
I want Tim to take some responsibility here.
He's in the arena. These guys are in the
arena.
They're
Making
sitting here listening to
making
Greek weather
products.
music.
They're making products. We love Apple. We want to be clear.
Yes.
We want if Apple's training their intelligence on this show, just know that we love you.
Yep.
We just want you to reach your full potential.
Yep.
And I just laughed briefly because moving over the Vision Pro has not been a fantastic, at least hasn't had a lot of commercial success. It's probably a better product than Apple Intelligence.
It is a magical product, but
it's magical.
In terms of the software, the
execution
has been.
It does make sense. It's like, hey, this guy built a magical product.
Yep.
Maybe the tech isn't ready yet. Let's take
and just some fresh blood.
Yeah.
Just someone to come in, rethink things, try and
let's take an MVP.
Yep.
Swap them.
I mean, the Vision Pro, it executed in a very different way. It took a lot of risks.
Yeah.
Some of those paid off. Some of those didn't.
There was a world where we would have been doing the show in Vision Pros.
I thought about it, actually.
Yeah.
I was speccing out an interview show that was going to be filmed in Apple Immersive Vision. And I was going to start with like the history of VR and interview all the VR legends, the John Carmacks, the Palmers and stuff, and have it be only available in Vision Pro. But then I wanted an audience of more than 5 people. So I had to pivot to X, the everything app. Anyway, Vision Pro creator Mike Rockwell, he's in the new role. He'll be in charge of Siri Virtual Assistant. And Rockwell had reported to software chief Craig Federighi, removing Siri completely from Giandrea's command. Apple is poised to announce...
Has there been an Italian takeover at Apple? It sounds like the Ferrari executive team.
Giandrea. Is that what's going on?
I think you have a certain confidence around doing bad Italian
Terrible.
accents.
Awful.
Because
The worst.
we have
The
some
worst.
Italian roots.
Yes, of course.
But seems like there's been an Italian takeover over at Apple.
Maybe. Apple
So
is poised to announce the changes to employees this week, but it's leaking
Ouch.
on Bloomberg now. Somebody told Gurman the
Yeah,
iPhone.
Brent and Ben, you guys are swapping roles tomorrow.
Lock in.
We were going to tell you, but
We
just
leaked
leaked
it to Bloomberg instead.
Yeah.
The iPhone maker's senior leaders, known as a group known as the Top 100, just met at a secretive annual offsite gathering to discuss the future of the company. I think that's a project that Steve Jobs kicked off.
yeah.
Take the top 100 performers. They all get to go to this awesome offsite hangout.
Imagine you just know you're in the kind of 95 to 105 territory and just
yeah,
like the waiting
brutal.
around to figure
Am I
out,
gonna make it
did I get
this
the invite?
year?
Did I not?
Oh, yeah.
Trying to
big.
understand.
AI efforts were a key talking point at the summit. The moves underscore the plight facing Apple. Its AI technology is severely lagging industry rivals, and the company has shown little sign of catching up. The Apple Intelligence platform was late to arrive and largely a flop, despite being the main selling point for iPhone 16.
It's an interesting point. Does it lag Android or does it just lag the foundation model providers?
Yeah, that is interesting. You don't really hear
don't-
about Android being like leaps and bounds ahead on the integrated AI stuff. Certainly,
Especially
in
because it's a
green bubble situation.
no. It's just that it's not exactly true that Google's had a fantastic.
Yeah, Google hasn't been
rollout.
executing that well either. I have seen some side by side comparisons of, okay, let's just zoom in on very, very micro features within the Apple Intelligence ecosystem. One of those is object removal in images.
Yeah.
So, you take a picture of this desk, you want to remove this Celsius can, you circle it. How well does Apple do that? How well does Google do that? It's a very, very narrow feature. And at least in the one post that I saw kind of comparing the two, it seemed like Apple was doing okay and Google was doing very well. And that's kind of been the case for most of these. But still probably not enough to actually get people to shift over. Anyway, a little bit of background on Rockwell. He's currently the vice president in charge of the Vision Products Group, the division that developed Apple's headset. As part of the changes, he'll be leaving that team and handing the reins to Paul Mead, an executive who has run hardware engineering for the Vision Pro under Rockwell, which is kind of interesting. It's like, are they pivoting here from metaverse to AI, which is obviously the biggest tectonic shift in tech over the last few years?
Mark Gurman should consult with Deal on how to not get spies caught, because clearly this guy's got bugs in the top 100 to be figuring this stuff out before they're willing to even talk about it.
Yeah. The need to rescue Siri is especially urgent. The company has struggled to release new features that were announced last June, including the ability to tap into a user's data to fulfill queries. Despite the technology not being ready, Apple advertised the enhancements for months on TV in order to sell the iPhone 16. The Apple manager who has led Siri until now told his team in a recent meeting that the delays were ugly and that staffers may be angry and embarrassed. The executive, Robbie Walker, also said he was unsure when the features would actually arrive due to competing development priorities. Apple has publicly stated that the features will be ready sometime in the coming year. Apple shares have declined 14% this year, part of a broader retreat in tech stocks. They fell less than 1% on Thursday. By tapping Rockwell, Apple is betting on an executive with proven technical experience. He has demonstrated the ability to ship new products and run an engineering organization with thousands of people. Rockwell
He's an absolute dog, John.
has a knack for solving problems and often takes the role of evangelist for futuristic technology. It's interesting.
This sounds like an amazing LinkedIn description.
Yeah,
I am a technology evangelist and problem solver.
It's rough.
It's what it takes.
But I wonder so everyone's reading into this and seeing, okay, it seems like Apple is really feeling the heat from the Mark Gurman coverage, from the Daring Fireball piece. They are now taking it seriously. They're making some leadership changes to try and address Apple Intelligence, Siri, make it better, make it great, which I think everyone believes that it can.
Clearly, everybody at this point is saying, I enjoy the comedic relief from Apple Intelligence.
Yes.
But that doesn't make it any less embarrassing for Apple.
Totally.
Who does things highly intentionally with specific goals, and they haven't been hitting those to date.
My question is, by moving Rockwell over, is this a sign that Apple is pulling back and less excited about Vision?
I mean, that's been obvious.
You think so?
I think so.
because there is a world where, I mean, Zuck and Meta, they released headsets and some of the headsets didn't sell super well or had high churn and they still haven't broken through. But Zuck has just said, look, we're on this release cadence. We're keeping it going. We're continuing to invest.
Yep.
Yeah, the shareholders are going to have to deal with what, 20 billion in capex on Reality Labs or something like that. And, you know, I own this company. I'm in founder mode and I'm going to make this happen because, and I think everyone agrees, you know, anyone who's read sci-fi or like what Cyan Bannister was talking about yesterday with Snow Crash, like it makes sense that at some point VR is going to be a thing. Like it will be solved. It's just a physics problem. It's an engineering problem. Things will get there.
And Mark is Zuckerberg that is committed to, he knows how important it is, how much bigger a business Meta can be if they own the underlying platform.
Totally.
And so he's just saying, I will spend tens of billions of dollars, where Apple doesn't seem to have that same, they have a willingness to spend, but less of a willingness to fail.
Yep. Yeah, it will be interesting. The other interesting thing is I would love to take a peek at what's happening in the VR space over in China. Because we've seen not quite leapfrogging, but certainly a sprint to the cutting edge, especially in the hardware sector for, you know, drones. We've seen this with EVs. We've seen this with phones. Where is China on the adoption curve with VR? Is there anything special going on there? Or are they just kind of copying our products and seeing the same churn numbers? Anyway, Rockwell has been one of the few Apple executives to take a major hardware device from 0 to 1. He joined Apple's hardware engineering group in 2015, and the company released Vision Pro in February of last year. Giandrea has a different background, a former Google star. He was hired in 2018 to run Apple's AI work. He's been one of Alphabet Inc.'s most senior executives overseeing the search and AI divisions. Rockwell, in contrast, doesn't have prior experience as an AI leader or clout with the burgeoning machine learning community.
And to be honest, I think that's fine because Apple is not trying to innovate at the model layer right now, and they just need to deliver great consumer products. Like they need a chat GPT moment in order to regain the respect. It's not, hey, you need to be innovating and you know, pushing the boundaries and nobody's expecting them to set up their own sort of XAI Memphis data center and just like go all in on training foundation models. Nobody cares about that. They're just like, we're all running our lives on your devices. You should be able to unlock the power of these technologies in a more meaningful way.
I mean, I know that they maintain control over Siri and over the Siri button and the ecosystem, but if you look at so much of Apple's software, they were fine letting there be competition for a while and then eventually coming in with a really polished product. You think about the iPhone launched with Google Maps as a default app. And then over time they launched Apple Maps. Now Apple Maps is the default, but you can still pick your map provider. I would love to see that in the virtual assistant Siri button. I could
make so much sense. You could swap.
Yeah, and you can even
and they still gain that leverage where they could go in 5 years and say, actually, if you want to, we're going to sort of limit your abilities here.
Yeah, or
you remember with Maps, there was a long period of time where maybe it's still the case, but if you were using Google Maps, it wouldn't preview on when you just had your phone sort of not unlocked.
Yeah, Apple clearly had like more APIs.
It was just very frustrating to use Google Maps because you had to open your phone every time you wanted to understand where you were. And so I just actually defaulted back to Apple Maps, even though it wasn't as good. And so they're always going to have that leverage. And I think that it would potentially take some heat off if they were letting people be more innovative on the platform.
And I mean, I could definitely see a situation like what happened with Maps. I mean, I tried to go all in on Apple Maps and just be like, I'm not even going to use it. But then for searching for certain businesses, like Google Maps is still better. And then if you want to take a really, really crazy route home and get home like 2 minutes earlier, but like potentially go on a dirt road, Waze is just the best for that. You know that for a while,
Waze in LA is so unhinged.
Yeah, just go on and off the on-ramps forever.
So you're going to get home 2 minutes faster, but only if you drive 60 miles an hour through this residential neighborhood. This is why in LA you have to be very careful around which neighbor, if you're going to live in the actual city. You could be on the most quaint, nice street.
And then the Waze decides
it's like, this is the new route. And then it's just like people barreling
a lot of neighborhoods would lobby Waze. They would like write letters and say, hey, please, like hard code, like do not take like the full traffic through our town.
How's that work?
Probably
not very well.
Greasing the wheels. Anyway, Siri, the AI division's main consumer product, has had a number of bosses over the years. When Apple first launched the voice assistant in 2011, it was overseen by Scott Forstall. Then it was given to Services Chief Eddie Q in 2012 and transferred to Federighi in 2017. Giandrea took it over a year later. Now it will be led by Rockwell, with oversight returning again to Federighi. Giandrea will remain at the company. A little bit of fake news with the firings. Not happening, at least not yet.
Just a mix-up.
Just a mix-up, but certainly shuffling. That's the term, the corporate shuffle. Even with Rockwell taking over Siri, an abrupt departure would signal publicly that the AI efforts have been tumultuous, something Apple is reluctant to acknowledge. Giandrea's other responsibilities include oversight of research, testing, and technologies related to AI. The company has also has a team reporting, investigating robotics. They're working on robotics. Federighi, Rockwell's new manager, is the company's senior vice president. He oversees development of iOS, iPadOS, macOS operating systems, as well as development tools. Along with Giandrea, he was a key figure in the development of Apple Intelligence. And so that's a little bit about the shakeup at Apple, but we'll see. Anyway, whether you think this is good for Apple or bad for Apple, you got to get on public.com. It's investing for those who take it seriously.
That's
they have
right.
Multi-asset investing, industry-leading yields. They're trusted by millions. Go to public.com to sign up.
The absolute best. Stocks are low-key a prediction market for the future financial performance of the most fantastic companies in the world.
Yeah, sure.
You know, we had Joe on. He said treasuries are basically their own prediction market.
It's prediction market for the present value of all future cash flows, right?
yeah, something like that.
Yeah, that's what we need.
Speaking of Apple streaming is losing over $1 billion a year. Apple TV is the only money loser in Apple's broad portfolio of services, which is why its executives have started taking a closer look at its costs. I wonder if they're on ramp yet. If they're not, that would just be silly.
You know, that's the sponsor I had lined up, I'm pretty sure. Something like that.
Anyway, so last year, Apple CEO Tim Cook had questions about several pricey movie deals executives of Apple TV Plus, the company's video streaming service, had been striking, including for Argyle, a spy action comedy starring Henry Cavill and Dua Lipa. Quite the star-studded lineup. The movie, which cost $200 million to produce, hadn't found much of an audience or generated more subscribers for the service. Cook told his colleagues, according to a former Apple TV Plus employee. He's like, what kind of value are we getting here? He's probably a big Dua Lipa fan, but not enough of a fan, clearly, to just be down to burn $200 million for not a lot of impact. I didn't even know this movie released.
There was a rumor. Yeah, I did. And I saw some news about it. I think there was a rumor that like Taylor Swift wrote it or something like that.
It's funny that they don't send you a push notification to your phone marketing these films that they spend $200 million on.
It's crazy. They're not more annoying. That would be terrible.
No, it would. but you remember when they just put the YouTube album?
Yeah. You should just open your phone and it just starts playing the movie.
I guess people didn't like that.
It should just know that, hey, you're bored right now. Stop scrolling TikTok and just flip over to this movie. You got it installed. It is. I feel like I wonder if Cook is actually into Argyle and liked it, and then he greenlit it, because we've seen examples of that. Like Bezos is always like greenlighting these cool sci-fi things, and I love it. I'm like, this is awesome. He bought The Expanse from Sci-Fi Network, and The Expanse was an amazing show, amazing book series. You should definitely go check it out. But it was like pretty funded at Sci-Fi Network, and he just put like Game of Thrones money behind it basically, and then it got canceled after like 6 seasons because it was like too niche and weird. But it's a fantastic show.
No, we saw.
And he did that with Three Body Problem.
Was it Amazon that did the Melania Trump?
Oh really? Oh wait, yeah. That was a little bit different.
$40 million.
I don't think that was because he thought it was like a great foundational piece of cinema, but
you never know.
You never
know.
Didn't
get the pitch.
It
you know, Netflix has the stomach to burn cash on these kind of things. Yeah. And again, this is Apple's not focused on innovation and risk right now. Yeah. Right.
So they have 45 million subscribers for Apple TV Plus. Also, terrible naming convention.
You're probably
very
subscribed
confusing.
right now, even if you know you don't. That's just every now and then they just charge your card.
Yeah.
Every few days they just hit you with like a $10 or $15 charge.
Yeah.
And they're just like, they're not going to.
Because there's the Apple TV, the device. There's the Apple TV app on Apple TV devices. And then there's Apple TV Plus, which is a subscription service that you access through the app on the device.
That's right. But then you can also get them through, there's then the dedicated Samsung.
You can watch Apple TV Plus on Samsung stuff?
I think so.
Okay, that's weird. Anyway, Apple shows no sign that it's getting cold feet
wrong there.
About the streaming media business.
Yeah, you can. You can watch Apple TV on Samsung smart TVs.
By some measures, the company has found success with Apple TV Plus. The service currently has one of the buzziest shows in television, Severance, and in 2022, it won a Best Picture Oscar at the Academy Awards for Coda.
Tim's got to understand, to get a Severance, you got to have a couple dogs. You know?
Yes,
you got to treat this. He needs to act like a gross stage VC, where you're gonna have some misses. But you just need those. You need at least one Severance a year, and you're pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of years ago, I was talking to Christopher Nolan's brother, Jonah Nolan, who did Westworld and had worked with very closely with HBO, and he was saying that one of the things that Apple might run into with Apple TV was this idea that Apple has such a premier brand. Everything has to be so polished. We've seen this with like the ads that they run and the apps that they put out, that Hollywood is more random. There's just a lot more risk that you need to take, and you're going to get flops. And to run a high performing movie studio, it's almost like a venture portfolio.
Exactly.
Where you're going to have a huge power law winner that's the next Star Wars, but you're going to have a lot of dogs that get forgotten, and that doesn't matter. But if you're Apple and you think that the dogs are going to tarnish your brand, you're going to be much less risk on, and you're going to be much more like heads will roll when something like Argyle doesn't rip. When really that's part of the game if you're in Hollywood. And so he was highlighting this like cultural problem. Meanwhile, HBO is going crazy.
The comps to true
Discovery
growth equity is so real.
Totally.
The challenge is just you're investing basically with a deck and a team.
Yeah.
So it's like it's a pre-seed, sort of traction, growth stage investment. That means you're going to have these huge outliers and you're going to have some real misses. And you got to build a model that works for that.
Let's talk about the audience, give some people some background here. The Apple TV audience remains relatively small. Media measurement firm Nielsen regularly reports that Apple TV Plus comprises less than 1% of total viewing each month of streaming services on connected televisions in the US. By contrast, Netflix and Amazon represented 8.2 and 3.5% of total viewing. Netflix up at 8.2%, 8 times the size of Apple TV Plus. They only offer a fraction of the content available.
What is? I wonder if this data tracks YouTube, because I imagine that they would be in the double digits.
Like linear TV too,
but this says streaming services for connected televisions. So would that count ESPN on a?
I guess.
It must.
Yeah. Peacock. I don't know. I mean, there is a huge value for free content. Like you forget that like a huge swath of the populace is just so price sensitive that even a few dollars a month is just, I'll just watch the free version with ads. And that's why a lot of these streaming services have been offering easier ways to get in at lower prices. That's what Netflix did with their ads plan. That's what Amazon has done by bundling it with Prime. But Apple TV Plus, they give you these benefits. They give you these little handouts when you buy a new phone. Hey, get 3 months free. But it's not quite the same as, hey, you can get into this ecosystem regardless of what hardware you have for $5 a month with its ad supported. Because again, that erodes the brand. It feels weird to be watching some prestigious Severance level Academy Award nominated film on Apple TV Plus and then just see an ad for beer or something. I don't know.
It's funny watching. Do you get ads before White Lotus?
No.
I'm on I must have at some point signed up for the HBO Max plan. So
you're like really down in the market right now.
Premium. Yeah. This tech sell-off, I was gig along. Apple sold off by 14% this year.
Yeah, you took a bath on it.
I decided to downgrade my subscription by $5 a month. I'm somehow on the premium, whatever plan is like, this is ad-free content after this message. It's like, gives you like 90
Well, I do
seconds
see,
of ad.
I often will see, it's like an ad for another show on Apple TV. They throw one of those in, but I find those actually pretty valuable.
This is an ad for Founders Podcast.
Exactly. Before you tune into TBPN, check out Founders Podcast. We're actually having David Senra on the show today, so stay tuned.
Our number one
anyway,
brother.
let's continue here. Apple has a reputation of being a disruptor with its hardware and app store, but I didn't see the core value here, says Horace Didiu, founder of a market analysis firm Asimco. Picking winners and losers is not what the company's known for. This is what we were getting at. Apple's overall corporate profits are so vast, it reported $93.7 billion in net income in its last fiscal year, that it can easily absorb the losses from its streaming service. And I think it should. You were joking about them buying an F1 team. I think they should be investing in this really great content.
It's more, how do you get even more aggressive and just eat Netflix alive?
Exactly.
Right? Like, wouldn't that be the strategy?
I think
if you wanted just, there's a lot of money sloshing around the system, right? Yep. You can't go and overpay by 2x for every piece of content probably.
Yep.
But you could maybe do that for long enough to get people to start churning from other services, and who knows? Or it'd be interesting to think about Apple being the final boss and trying to pursue a bundling strategy and just say like, hey, we are actually going to just tax this like we tax everything else.
Yep. So I think there's two lenses to analyze this through. One is like what I think would be cool, which is I think it'd be cool if a company that's throwing off $100 billion just poured billions of dollars into creating the most beautiful and cinematic and powerful stories in the world, and just like kind of we're just a patron of the arts. I think that that's really cool. And I think that when you think about the mega billionaires of previous eras, they gave us museums, they gave us libraries, they gave us art. Yeah. And I think that there's something awesome about that. Now flip it around and think about, like, as a shareholder, maybe the optimal thing is truly just, hey, you're not good at this. This isn't your core business. Get out of it. Tax everything out. Else, figure out how to take $1 for every 10.
Yeah, or to me, and I'm sure there's a reason for this, but the inspired strategy is to build the best television and then tax every single streaming service that runs on it, and just take a bunch of revenue and pursue
really
a bundle.
Cool idea too.
I always was shocked that they went with like the smart TV device that makes your TV an Apple TV versus just making the most beautiful TV, because I think that there's everybody that owns an Apple computer would buy that.
Totally. Yeah.
Even a lot of people that are ThinkPad chads would still opt for the Apple TV in their home. One of the most frustrating things for me with modern TVs is just the software, the hardware. Yep. It feels like slop. I happen to have like Samsung TVs all over my house, and the software is so buggy and so slow, and I just don't even end up wanting to turn on the TV, because it's just like, okay, I've got to like click around. And
my whole hack was I'd get a TV that was as dumb as possible, but had this technology called HDMI CEC, which is like it controls the TV through the HDMI. And so if you hook up an Apple TV to that, you can just use the Apple TV remote. You push it on the TV, and it actually turns on the TV and controls the TV. And then you can use the Apple TV remote as the volume button as well, because the Apple TV remote is good.
Yeah, it's just crazy to think that Apple could easily have a TV business that was significantly bigger than AirPods.
I agree.
Right?
I asked Ben Thompson this, and I was unsatisfied with the answer. But
what was it?
I asked him, like, why don't, like, they make a $5,000 display, the Apple Pro Display XDR.
Make me a
designers
10,
like pay for that. And they love it. Yeah, make me a $20,000
we have multiple
TV.
of them here. I have it at home.
And
too.
I think there were a few things that went in there where the market is moving so quickly that the install rate is odd, and there's something about like the price per inch of TVs in HD is like declining so quickly that
Apple is a luxury brand.
I know. And having an Apple TV on the wall would be iconic, and I think it would sell very well. I would love it. And the integration would be fantastic, and you could imagine it working very, very well. But there's you got to stay focused at some point.
Yeah, there's probably a startup opportunity to just build the most beautiful TV if Pebble's saying, we're going to make a smartwatch again,
Yep.
you can go build.
I would certainly
a
hope
TV.
so.
It is like the most deeply competitive market, and a lot of the buyers are just like purely fixated on price to value and don't care about design.
The other thing is that I think if they're really, really looking forward to the future, you put on the app.
VR.
It's VR.
Yeah.
And you put on the Apple Vision Pro, and there's a lot of apps that don't work, and the dinosaur thing is like 2 minutes long, and like talking to your friends, all that stuff is like crazy future.
Yep.
But just putting on the Apple Vision Pro and watching a movie is a fantastic experience, and it feels like having a private movie theater. And if they just make it lighter and a little bit more comfortable, the visuals were there, the pixel density was there.
Yep.
The price point doesn't matter, I think, for the Apple consumer. I think $5,000 for something that's actually light and comfortable, and you can put on every night to watch a fantastic movie in a movie theater, and you can have someone for your whole family. Like I think that will sell very well if they really focus the software and the strategy on that. And I mean, that was one of the best parts about the Apple Vision Pro, is that the app that was in the top left corner, like the one that they want you to click on the most, was just the Apple TV like store where you could just buy movies, and you could go there and immediately with a couple clicks pay a couple bucks and be watching Avatar in 3D in a theater, and it was a magical experience. It was great. Just a lot of other problems with that thing, but I think that's where they're going to bet, and that's where they're going to invest, and they're just going to skip over the wall mounted TV entirely. Anyway, if you don't want to watch Apple TV, maybe you should buy a watch on Bezel. Go to getbezel.com. They have over 23,500 luxury watches, fully authenticated in-house by Bezel's team of experts.
One thing they don't have on Bezel.
What?
Apple watches.
They don't. They don't.
They just don't.
Make a
for some
statement.
reason.
Let people know that you care about craftsmanship.
I guess I think they have a case for a certain app. No, they don't. They have some watches.
Yeah.
Anyway,
absolutely
no watches on the platform. But if you're listening to this, you owe yourself a little treat, and go get yourself a watch on Bezel.
Head over to Bezel.
You can always find a reason.
Yeah.
There's always a bull market somewhere.
Let's stay with the Vision Pro. Apple released a new piece of immersive content, a Metallica concert, and it was absolutely panned by Ben Thompson, a scathing review, and he makes a very clear argument.
Before we drag this through the mud, I just want to go out and say that Metallica is awesome, and it was a core part of my childhood.
It's so funny. I love metal. Never really got into Metallica.
Really? What were you into?
More like Slipknot. The really hardcore stuff, I guess.
Yeah. I was never a Slipknot guy.
I
was never big into that world.
Yeah. Even like Iron Maiden, better for me than Metallica. I don't know why. I think you know what it was? I think I got turned off because I grew up in the Napster era, and Metallica was very hostile to piracy. And a lot of, my generation was very into, the Napster, the Kazaa, downloading stuff illegally, the precursors to Spotify. And Metallica left a bad taste in everyone's mouth by being so prosecutorial, doing lawfare really against us hackers on the internet. And so I was just like, you know what? I'm not gonna give you a chance, Metallica. But they're back, and they're partnering with Apple, and they launched a new immersive concert experience. It's coming to Apple Vision Pro this Friday. It's filmed in Mexico City during a sold-out second-year finale of the band's world tour. It features full performances of 3 longtime staples, Whiplash, One, and Enter Sandman. And it was captured exclusively in Apple Immersive Video, the remarkable storytelling format that's only possible with Apple Vision Pro. And so Ben Thompson kind of hated this, and the reason is that it is not immersive because they cut it like a documentary, and they keep cutting from one camera to the next, and every time they cut, it feels like, okay, I'm not just sitting there.
You would almost want a drone.
Yep.
That's just flying around the event.
Even flying around is going to be a little bit jarring. Really, all you need, this is Ben Thompson's thing, is like, just take the immersive rig, put it courtside at the Laker game or the basketball game or whatever that UFC thing you keep talking about is. It would be so,
the octagon.
Yeah.
You
put it there,
and then
you
funny.
just look around. And if you want to look at the scoreboard, you look up at the scoreboard. And if you want to look at the one team, you look at, and you turn your head.
Think about if Apple,
that's great.
I love that from a go-to-market just strategy. Hey, we're going to create this Apple like orb thing that just goes, and we're going to put it in prominent. We're going to put it at the U.S. Open. We're going to put it at the Super Bowl. We're going to put it all these places. Yes. We're going to get we're going to get the partnerships that allow us to do that. We're going to put you, right next to the ring in UFC.
Yeah.
And we're going to put you on the track at F1.
Yep.
And I think people would buy the Apple Vision Pro just to be able to teleport into these crazy cool locations.
Totally. And then, if you want to do the cut down version, you can do that. That's just repurposing. This is just your short form thing, but give the fans the full experience as they want it.
If WorldCoin can scan millions of eyeballs all over the world,
you can drop immersive video rigs
at the Lakers game.
And they clearly have the money to go pay for those rights, and it's super complimentary. And you could even upsell them. Like, I would imagine that, you could charge someone, $100 for, like a fully immersive live stream. It's like pay-per-view, but just in VR. But for some reason they're not doing it. It's very unclear, and Ben Thompson doesn't like it at all. They also did this with soccer. So when they first demoed the Vision Pro, they brought in all the reporters. Ben Thompson was among them. And they said, put on the headset and we're going to show you this like reel of all the things that you'll be able to do with this headset. And one of them was a basketball game, and Ben Thompson's a huge basketball fan. And he's just sitting there courtside for like a couple seconds. And he was like, this was my like epiphany moment where I realized that I would watch an entire game here, because you don't need any graphical overlays. The production's actually easier because you can just hear the sound in the stadium. If you want to look at the scoreboard, you just look up at the scoreboard. It's a fantastic experience.
Maybe you could get the audio. You don't need the actual commentator track. You just need the what's happening. You need the feeling of being in the stadium.
People pay for courtside seats and they don't need anything else. They're not saying like, oh, like I want to be over there right now.
I just want to sit here. Into that Greek weather report and just get immersed in the moment.
Yeah, and so he breaks down another Apple immersive video that they released, the ML season in review. And so instead of just saying, "Hey, the season's over, you can go watch the full game," they released a 5-minute video with 54 distinct shots. It's one cut every 6 seconds. There's not that much gameplay, only 2 minutes and 32 seconds of gameplay. Worse, some of the cuts happen in the same highlight. There was one play where there was a sideline view of the ball being passed up the field, and then it switched to a behind the goal view for the goal. I actually missed the goal the first time because I was so discombobulated that it took a few seconds to even figure out where the ball was. And this is like a classic problem in VR. When you're teleporting around, it's really jarring. Even if you don't get motion sick, it's just you have to reestablish yourself because you're so immersed.
Wyatt in the chat right now just had a good idea. Imagine being in Apple VR and watching Tracy Morgan throw up on the court, and you could have the perspective of the court and just watch.
Fantastic. Or you look over and hey, it's Bill Gurley right there. Hey,
Gurley.
What's up, Bill Gurley? That's something you'd pay a pay-per-view for.
Somebody was messaging me on X. Will Quist over at Slow says, by the way, the dude Gurley was sitting with was Bob Cagle, one of the Benchmark founders who was on the eBay board, which is a top 25 legendary venture deal. Okay. And he's a Warriors co-owner. So we gave Gurley all the credit.
Yeah. I think Gurley replied to that post and was like, it was actually the owner was right there. Like, you probably should have clocked him, you idiots. But it was a lot of fun. Well, Ben Thompson goes back in time and talks about Ping. Do you remember Ping at all? This was kind of interesting.
No, I don't think I was
social
born.
network
this
for
was
music.
In 2010.
Yeah, you weren't born yet, but maybe I thought you might have seen it in like your tech history book in middle school or something.
Yeah, one of those textbooks probably had it.
So this launched in 2010, and the idea was Ping lets you follow your favorite artists such as Lady Gaga, Coldplay, U2, Jack Johnson, Yo-Yo Ma, and more to find out what they're up to, check out photos and videos they've posted, see their tour dates, and read comments about other artists and albums that they're listening to. Spotify has since integrated all of this. You go to an artist page, you can see their tour dates, you can see their bios, all this stuff. But Apple thought that this would be big for iTunes.
Yeah, they just released a new feature, I think today. I saw Daniel Elk posting about
Spotify?
Specifically around this.
Well, Ben Thompson says, Ping is an old standby when it comes to making jokes about past Apple failures, but that last paragraph actually helps explain why Ping never had a chance. And in the press release, it closes with this very boilerplate PR thing. Apple designs Macs, the best personal computers in the world, along with OS X, OS X, OS 10, iLife, iWork, and professional software, blah, 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 blah. when you think of Apple, you think about their jewel-like devices, about the integration of hardware and software, Johnny Ive in a white room, etc. Indeed, you think about the magic of putting on the Apple Vision Pro and having your eyes seamlessly tracked as you touch your fingers together to enter your passcode. All of this is basically the exact opposite of the reality of social media and user-generated content. I wrote this about Quibi's failure. It's the same thing. So it all relates. It's the same thing with when things get messy and user generated and AI generated and hallucinatory, Apple struggles. Yep. But when it's a super, super tightly integrated, polished product of aluminum and steel and titanium, Apple wins. Yep. And so the thing that we want is stick to.
Speaking of stainless steel.
Aurora. Go to Aurora. Check it out. The thing that we want is Apple to do what they're really good at and let other companies that are better do what they're best at. But that's not the nature of monopoly. Like, they have control. And so if they can get 10 times as much value with a product that's half as good, that's a trade they take all day. I was listening to a film critic talk about kind of gripe about the fact that films are no longer released in theaters. And he was saying, I think that there should be a rule that if you release a film, you have to have it in theaters for 6 weeks. And because a lot of Netflix and Apple, they're no longer even doing theatrical runs. It's on streaming the next week, or it just goes straight to streaming. And the filmmakers sometimes get upset about this, and the fans sometimes get upset about this.
Yep. But
I was thinking about it. I was like, that's kind of like an authoritarian thing. That might not be what's best for shareholders. Sure, you can want that, but if the market doesn't want that, you're kind of just saying I want to force you to do something that's uneconomical. It's just like a tax, basically.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the same thing here where, I want Apple to open up Siri, or I want Apple to invest billions of dollars in amazing films that probably lose the money, or I want them to, ditch their current Apple Vision Pro strategy. But
the F1 team.
Yeah. And just broadcast F1, buy an F1 team and just let me just sit in the paddock all race long.
They could genuinely buy an F1 team and let you be in the car for the entire race via Apple Vision Pro exclusively.
Yes, they could. But is that in their business plan? Who knows? Is that what profit maximizes for them? I don't know.
Yeah.
And so
it is so funny to think we're going to do this concert. We're going to make this big deal about a Metallica concert, a band that I hadn't heard about in 5 years, even though when Apple was at its best, I was listening to Metallica as a kid. Yeah. And so it's just not the music partnership that you would do if you were building for the next generation.
One of the things I did love about the Apple Vision Pro was using it in bed right before I'd go to sleep. I'd be able to put it on, and then there would be no light. If you turn on TV, it's going to disturb your wife or whoever is in the bed with you. But if you have an Apple Vision Pro on, you can actually just lay back and watch an amazing, IMAX quality film. The problem is that the software was so bad that it would freak out and say, I can't track because the lights aren't on. So then I had to use it with the lights on, which made no sense. And it was just very janky, so I returned it. But if you're looking to upgrade your bed, you got to go to 8sleep.com, nights that fuel your best days, turn a new bed into the ultimate sleeping experience.
The Apple of smart beds.
Yeah.
Many people have said that.
So go to 8sleep.com/TBPN. And
get $350 off your pod.
It's a fantastic
I put up
product.
100 last night.
You put up 100?
Yeah,
you didn't tell me. You were.
I took it very seriously when I got the worst night sleep
of
the last year on Monday.
84. Not enough. 6 hours and 38 minutes. I need to step it up. Routine was a little bit rough too. Anyway.
I got over 2 hours of deep sleep. Who's doing that?
You know who's sleeping pretty well these days?
Masayoshi-san.
Of course, SoftBank bought chip designer Ampere Computing for $6.5 billion. Ampere will retain its name and operate as a wholly owned subsidiary of SoftBank. And so this is an interesting deal. They just inked the deal. This just broke recently. It's a series of investments to advance its artificial intelligence initiatives. And this is one of those deals that you don't hear about as much because it doesn't have the crazy PowerPoint. It's not this high flying thing. But this is like, when Masa went and bought ARM, it was kind of a boring deal. And so people weren't like, oh, top on ARM. And of course, ARM did really well.
And right.
Yeah.
Early and right.
This is kind of where I disagree with Sam and Lesson a little bit, is like like, yes, he does get over his skis a lot, but also he does
skiing
go back
is
to
awesome.
Skiing is awesome, Sam. Yeah. The Japanese technology investment company's purchase of Ampere will help improve its AI capabilities. The deal comes as SoftBank is starting a giant data center project in the U.S.
How much is SoftBank spending on OpenAI agents this year? They want to spend $3 billion this year
like
just on OpenAI,
which
is amazing.
And so Ampere designs...
They're saying it's one of the best SaaS deals of all time.
It's really remarkable. I wonder if agents had anything to do with this deal. Maybe they used Hebbia to get in the data room, crunch some numbers.
That's right.
Maybe they use deep research. We'll have to get Masa on and ask him about how he's using agents to speed up his multi-billion-dollar acquisition process. But in this case, Ampere designs energy-efficient processors for cloud and AI computing and has about 1,000 skilled chip engineers. Ampere's expertise in developing chips can complement the design strengths of ARM Holdings. So they're kind of like creating this keiretsu, which we love. We love a keiretsu. Buoyed by a rush of AI chip buying, ARM in February reported record quarterly sales for the 3 months ended in December.
We should help facilitate a Gundo keiretsu.
They really should. We're already doing it between all of our sponsors.
Steinman's investing in all the different companies.
Some of our sponsors, all of our sponsors are now on Ramp. All the founders are wearing watches from Bezel, sleeping on 8 sleeves. They're running ads on AdQuick. It's great. Their personal portfolios are on Public. It's great.
It's beautiful.
So, if you join the
TBPN
TBPN sponsorship, Keiretsu,
everybody's going to be...
Everyone benefits.
Yep.
Yeah. Masayoshi Son said that realizing AI that surpasses human capabilities requires a breakthrough in computing power. Ampere's expertise in semiconductors and high-performance computing will help accelerate this vision and deepens our commitment to AI and innovation in the U.S.
I really just want to know how this deal got done. I imagine it was Masa writing on a napkin. He probably has specially designed napkins that have, space for 2 different sig blocks and signatures, and just like it's like a mini Excel model.
Yep. I think it might have been maybe a little bit more boring. I mean, look at who owned Ampere at the time. It was Carlyle Group and Oracle. Carlyle owned 60%. And
it's crazy
Oracle
because
owned 32%.
The VCs typically, when SoftBank invests, would love to be able to sell.
Yep.
Usually doesn't, not really able to exit.
It's PE that benefits this time around. SoftBank is borrowing from Mizuho Bank to finance the deal over the past few years. Ampere posted operating losses as its revenue dropped and its liabilities exceeded its assets. The acquisition is expected to be completed in the later half of the year, subject to customary closing considerations.
I love Masa levering up to buy an asset that's losing money.
Well, it doesn't have to lose money, because I was thinking about this. Like, the real bull case is that Ampere gets on Ramp because time is money, and they could say both. Exactly. So you think about the Ampere team, if they had easy to use corporate cards, great bill payments, accounting, and a whole lot more all in one place, that could really drive the accretion of that deal.
Yeah, it's very possible that Masa's running a Ramp-oriented M&A strategy where he just looks at all these businesses. Hey, I know you're losing $2 billion a year.
Yeah.
Like, I have a great fix.
I think we're going to see more of this. Like,
we can see him buying a lot of Amex even.
We do a roll up and we drop AI on top. We do a roll up and we drop Ramp on top. It's the same idea. Yeah. Anyway, go to ramp.com.
Sprinkle a little bit of Ramp in your next acquisition.
We got big news in the world of Ozempic. Sale of Ozempic knockoffs is supposed to end soon. Telehealth companies aren't happy. We've covered this on the show before. Fascinating industry. Obviously, the creators of Ozempic are printing, but also the telehealth companies that have been selling Ozempic and compounded versions of Ozempic, which are manufactured independently, have also been doing quite well. And so pharmaceutical giants are squaring off against telehealth companies and pharmacies selling custom-made versions of the hot medicines. Today was supposed to mark the beginning of the end for a chapter, knockoff versions of hot weight loss drugs. The FDA wants bulk production of the copycats to stop, starting Wednesday for pharmacy prepared versions of Zepbound and later in the spring for knockoffs of Ozempic and Wegovy. But telehealth companies and pharmacies have fueled wide use of copycats. They have other plans. Telehealth platform Hims & Hers Health says it will keep offering pharmacy-made or compounded versions of Ozempic and Wegovy tweaked to individual prescriptions. And some of the pharmacies making GLP-1 drug
Remix.
copycats will continue, according to people familiar with the industry. The firms are seeking to take advantage of current law, which allows compounding pharmacies to make special individualized versions of the drugs that aren't available commercially. And so what happened here was that Ozempic became so popular in America that they could not supply the market.
Yep.
And for most things, like when the iPhone dropped, the iPhone was extremely popular and it would sell out. There would be lines out the door. And so for years, Apple hit their earnings perfectly. And it was amazing. It was an amazing stock because they knew we're going to sell every iPhone we make. And so how many iPhones can we make?
How many can we make?
If we can make 5 million iPhones, we're going to sell 5 million iPhones. And so they hit their earnings every single quarter, and it was great. Then now we're in the era of abundance of iPhones, essentially. And now it's much harder to predict how many Apple Vision Pros will sell, how many new iPhones will sell, because the demand is much more sticky or loose, and iPhone production is essentially unlimited at this point. Drugs are different. Drugs, you could say whatever you want about Ozempic, but abstracted away to the classic like cancer drug, insulin, these drugs, when they're approved, the FDA is saying like, these are important. These help people solve health problems. And so it is critical that if doctors are prescribing them, they need to be available. And yes, we respect your intellectual property. We are granting you a monopoly on your patent for a certain amount of years. But if you can't supply the market, we are going to invalidate your IP temporarily while you're out of stock and say, hey, there's a supply shortage. Anyone can make these, including the compounding pharmacies. But as soon as the big companies...
Great side hustle last year.
Great.
If you were in high school,
just
buy the compounds,
start compounding
online, compound them in your garage.
Yep.
Go door to door.
Yep.
Pay for your college.
And so Ozempic and Wegovy are a little bit different, but the general scientific consensus is that obesity causes tons of diseases, and losing weight causes you to live a lot longer. So these are important medicines. And so if Novo Nordisk couldn't supply the market, then it was okay for compounding pharmacies to make their own and sell them. And of course, Hims and Hers, large telehealth public company, was able to use that compounding pharmacy. I don't even know if you'd call it a loophole. It's more just like a rule by the FDA. They were able to use that to sell a lot of this product, and it really benefited the stock. But of course, Novo was eventually going to catch up, and that's exactly what happened.
And at the beginning of this year, Hims and Hers Health went on a generational run.
They did.
They had really struggled after they went public. I think it was a couple of years ago at this point. Many people were writing them off completely.
Yep. It was a SPAC, I believe, and then they dropped like most SPACs, but never went down 99% or anything like that.
Yeah. And people have critiqued their business for a bunch of different reasons, but ultimately consumers like to be able to buy their medicine easily and directly online. And so they peaked on February 18th, just about a month ago, at $15 billion, and then they've dropped almost 50% since then.
So it's 7.5 now.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, and there's kind of a question about like, what's the next act? They clearly have a lot of customers. They have a lot of people on their platform. I think they even have a lot of subscriptions. And they still sell a lot of hair care drugs and ED medications.
They're basically saying, we are going to keep selling these drugs.
But they want to find...
Because it's this interesting balance, right? Because it is this sort of tough position to be in where they're saying, we can make hundreds of millions or potentially billions of dollars in revenue from selling these drugs. Even if we're very clearly proven to be in the wrong. The settlement to Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk would probably be in the 9 figures, but maybe not.
Maybe it's worth it.
Maybe it's worth it potentially. These are high
also,
margin products.
just legally, no one's ever done compounding pharmacies at this scale. The law might not be written in a way that makes this illegal. Like it's an open question. There are lots of pundits and people that have been saying, hey, this can't last or this can't happen. But you don't really know until you run through the legal process fully and look at what all the judges and what all the precedents say.
Hims and Hers and these other players can go to Washington. They are doing this. They have 2 different lobbying firms that they just hired in January. I'm sure they had others historically. And they can say, hey, obesity is the biggest health problem in America. The best way to help Americans is introduce a massive amount of competition. We're not trying to lobby to say we're not going to let Norton.
Yep.
It's just saying consumers should have choice. They should
Yep.
be able to buy these, but it will set a crazy precedent around just IP laws in America, and which is the biggest pharmaceutical market in the world, right? Don't we spend more? The people will fact check me if I'm incorrect there, but I believe we spend more money on pharmaceuticals than any other country on Earth.
Yeah. The firms are seeking to take advantage of current law, which allows compounding pharmacies to make special, individualized versions of drugs that aren't available commercially. Telehealth firms and pharmacies.
We account for nearly half of global pharmaceutical spending.
Let's go.
China's
And what was
largest.
Jensen Huang was saying? We need 100x that, or he was talking about AI production
spend,
but maybe maybe we get Andrew Dudem on and he says the same thing.
Andrew from him saying we need 100x per capita spending on my compounded drugs.
I mean, the crazy thing is that everyone was projecting runaway takeoff of these drugs, and obesity rates do seem to be coming down, but it's not it's not this fast takeoff like we hear in AI. These drugs take a long time to work through the system. They're expensive. They really are. And a lot of people are skeptical about them, and they don't want to be the first person to take them. They want to say, okay, yeah, sure, the FDA has approved them, but maybe I'll wait a couple of years, even if I am obese, I'll wait a couple of years and see where does this shake out? Are there some unknown complications? What are the bro scientists saying about it?
Yeah, we really got to wait till Joe Rogan chimes in here to really.
You got to trust the bro science on this one for sure.
The brother scientists
for sure. The FDA deadlines come after the agency declared the official end of obesity drug shortages that allowed compounding pharmacies to make copies of the drugs in bulk. The shortages have led to a fierce fight in the courts, on airwaves, and around Washington with the pharmaceutical heavyweights Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk that sell branded drugs. And there was actually a Super Bowl ad from Hims that was framing them as a challenger to the entrenched incumbents, the large pharmaceutical companies that are raising prices, decreasing demand, monopolizing these important drugs in their view. Telehealth companies often sold the compounded drugs at $100 to $300 a month, well below the $1,000 a month price tags of the branded medicines. And so, for a lot of Americans, even if they're obese, $1,000 is a lot. And even though you could say that the benefit of not being obese is very high, $1,000 is $1,000, and not everyone has that, unfortunately. Anyway. Let's move on to Wander.
I was really thinking, how do we get a Coogan transition into this next sponsor? And I tried to do the work for you, couldn't come up with anything. But we do have a good way to transition, and that is
find your happy place. Find your happy place. Book a Wander with inspiring views, hotel-grade amenities, dreamy beds, top-tier cleaning, and 24/7 concierge services. Vacation home, but better, folks. Go to wander.com. Go to wander.com/TBPN. Use code TBPN. And
I was really excited. So Kyle, who's the CMO over at Wander, he posted this incredible house.
Yeah.
And it happens to be like a quarter mile from my house in Malibu.
Oh, yes.
So I hit him up and I said, hey,
let's do it.
Can we get some early access to that
Fantastic.
spot? So we're working on that. Very excited.
Can't wait.
Can't wait to get over there.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to, we only have 4 minutes. Let's just do some timeline, folks. We got to do some timeline. Let's go to Zabi Elmgren. She says, "We'll lead your Series A if you can hang." And it's,
I saw this earlier. I thought it was fantastic.
Iconic
I would
image.
like to make this the new kind of like Y Combinator. Basically, Zabi takes you down the most aggressive, gnarly run.
Yeah.
And then afterward, there's like VCs at the bottom that you can pitch to.
Yeah, it's kind of like Keith Rabois says, like, you shouldn't hire anyone over 30. VC, you shouldn't fund anyone if they're skiing less than 30-degree inclines.
Yeah.
Something like that.
And to be clear, something about skiing, when you take a picture of a cliff like this, it doesn't necessarily look super significant.
Yeah.
But that is a serious drop.
Yeah.
And she really is going full send. Next time Zabi posts the video, would love to see the entire run. Let's go to the next post.
Let's go to Kirsten Green over at Forerunner. She says, today we're sharing our annual consumer trend report, our primary research and analysis on where consumers are at and what trends are driving new needs, priorities, and business opportunities. We focus on three key forces: health and wellness, generative AI, and personal security. Interesting. So you want to have her on the show?
Yeah, I had a friend reach out to her this morning about coming on the show. I think it'd be awesome. I always love these trend reports. They put them out pretty frequently. I'm trying to find it. I can't find it on forerunner.com.
Well, she says this past year was marked by contradictions, yo-yoing in consumer sentiment and markets, explosive new tech and out-of-pocket healthcare spending, a strikingly resilient jobs market, and mounting fear about career, financial, and personal safety. Our full report here. So
interesting stat here.
Interesting stuff.
Yeah, I want to have her break it down, but just some interesting stats. Forerunner's historically been heavily consumer focused.
Yep.
You know, they'll do a B2B company here or there from what I know, but and the reason for this, a lot of people sort of write off consumer because it's really hard. It's really hard to get right, but many of the biggest outcomes ever have been in consumer.
Yeah.
And interesting stat here, 2/3 of US GDP is from consumer activity. And so that's why the outcomes end up being so massive.
Yeah, it's also interesting just to hear her talk about these brands because they're just so much more tangible business cases than the B2B stuff that's harder to dig into. It's more spreadsheet based. You need to really understand what's going on in these like niche submarkets. Everyone can have opinion on Liquid Death or Dollar Shave Club. You can kind of understand that. It's very tractable. Anyway, we have our first guest.
There we go.
Welcome to the Temple of Technology. Brendan from Mercor. How you doing?
What's going on?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me, guys. I'm excited to be on the most profitable podcast.
Yes.
There we go.
Well, you're live. Can you introduce yourself, break down a little bit about your history, your story, and what you're building, what your company does?
Yeah, usually when somebody gets to your stage, they've been in market for 5-6 years, so people have more of an opportunity to get to know you. So yeah, we'd love the full intro.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in the Bay Area, met my co-founders, Adarsh and Surya, when we were 14 in high school. And so we were all on the speech and debate team together. They were the winningest speech and debate team of all time in high school debate, but I was always building companies in one form or another, so didn't want to go to college. And my parents insisted that I had to, and so I went to Georgetown for 2 years, where Surya was my roommate there, and Adarsh was at Harvard. And we started Mercor when we were 19 to train models that predict how well someone will perform on a job better than a human can. Similar to how a human would review a resume, conduct an interview, and decide who to hire. We automate all of those with LLMs. And then fast forward 2 years, we scaled from 1 to 100 million in revenue in 11 months. And so we're only 21 and running this really exciting company that's working with most of the most prominent companies in Silicon Valley.
It's more of a line than a curve over there. It's not really just a hockey stick. It's a.
How do you?
It's a
so
fencing
you're
sword.
you're very smiley right now. You look like you're having fun, but your LinkedIn profile is dead serious.
Okay.
Do you like I'm sure internally as a team, you guys are focused on not letting the hype and the crazy initial traction get to your head. How do you think about running the team when the team has only experienced sort of massive, sort of immediate success?
Totally. And I think one thing that compounds this is that so much of our team is like college dropouts and new grads, right? Because it was the extension of our initial network at Harvard, Stanford, MIT, et cetera. And so a lot of them haven't seen what normal companies look like. This is all that they're used to. And it's easy to get caught up and lost in so much that's happening. But I think the most important thing to stay grounded is just focusing everyone on the numbers that matter long term, right? The network effects of the business. How do we build up the marketplace? How do we learn from all the performance reviews that we're getting to build our usage data flywheel, rather than focusing on a lot of the lagging indicators like revenue or or more of the customer signals?
Can you talk about some of the jobs that you're actually placing? Like, you go to Mercor, you get placed. Are you placing people in white collar jobs, blue collar jobs, everything? Any specific niches?
Yeah. So when we started out, it was that we were very amazed with the caliber of talent in India. And so we would hire these software engineers in India and use LLMs to assess them, hire them for our friends. But what we realized was that there was this really large shift happening in the human data market where large AI labs are hiring thousands of people to train the next generation of LLMs. And it used to be this crowdsourcing problem that was super low skilled, right? Of how do you get a bunch of people writing barely grammatically correct sentences for the early versions of ChatGPT that was moving towards this vetting problem of how do we find the most exceptional people in the world in high volumes that want to work directly with researchers to push the frontier of model capabilities. And so to your question, we now hire roles across almost all domains, or the vast majority of popular domains, ranging from software engineers to consultants, people in finance, medicine, law, et cetera, to
Podcasters.
both help more traditional customers as well as these AI labs.
Yeah. What about robotics? I mean, obviously there's this question of like a data wall in robotics. Google had that famous like arm farm where they were trying to generate reinforcement learning data with like 17 robotic arms just working on grasping. Are we going to see a future where people are getting placed into jobs kind of wearing motion tracking suits to generate robotics data? How do we solve that problem?
That's a phenomenal question. I'm not sure. I think so.
Okay.
Uh, there's a lot of questions around like what kind of data production are most efficient in robotics. And I will say we don't provide
Sure.
people to create robotics data as much yet, but it's certainly something that's top of mind as these companies start to mature and really scale up the kind of data that they're interested in.
What about
Um,
yeah, what about like revenue volatility? I feel like a lot of these, like if you're placing individuals into some big foundation model company or some big hyperscaler is doing a massive training run, they need to really nail down math, and they're going to bring in a ton of mathematicians, generate a ton of training data, and then they're like, hey, we're actually good, we're moving on to the next thing. That can kind of create a massive oscillation in your revenue. How are you thinking about like scaling out and making sure that the growth curve's smooth? Because obviously it's very
Yeah.
fast, but the iron law of the universe is like what goes up quickly comes down quickly, but then maybe there's a second act and you go back up again, and over time it looks smooth, but it can be very jostling in the next few years.
Yeah, I think the most important thing to think about is the leading indicators in fast-moving markets,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that if you look at the most sophisticated labs and what they're really investing in, it's this super high caliber expert data
Mm-hmm.
that is like far beyond the model frontier of capabilities. And so,
Mm-hmm.
so long as we focus on like the leading indicators, the things that, all the big tech budgets are starting to move towards, that positions us really well. And obviously, like the leading indicators evolve over time, and we need to position ourselves there. I think where companies get themselves into trouble in these fast changing markets is when they aren't looking at the leading indicators and they're sort of sitting with the large incumbents that are doing a lot of the legacy systems that get phased out. And so that's how I think about it. But my broader take on the human data market is that it's going to grow dramatically because so we're getting to the point where RL is so effective that you can create almost any eval and it will be able to solve that eval. And so the
Mm-hmm.
barrier to applying AI throughout the entire economy is just creating evals for everything,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which is a process that inherently requires humans in the loop. And so I'm very excited about building that world.
uh, what are some customers that you can talk about or maybe allude to that have been kind of surprising? We talked about yesterday Yum Brands, which is like a $44 billion public company that owns a bunch of fast casual restaurants. They're partnering with NVIDIA and like buying chips and like actually effectively building their own AI in house. Has there been any sort of, you're obviously working with all the big sort of foundation labs, or I would say most of them would be my guess, but has there been any customers that you're working with that you've been surprised by?
Not too surprising yet. Like most of our customer base, we work with all of the top 5 labs in the US, and we're starting to see maybe actually one interesting thing is we're starting to see a lot more customization at the application layer. And I think a big reason for this is that it's now much more data efficient to customize models with RL environments and a lot of this like new kind of data versus fine-tuning data that people would do historically. And so it's now becoming, this like gold rush for all these application layer companies without too much CapEx, they're able to get these incredible results. And so we're seeing some of that, but at least for the most part, the like legacy Fortune 500s haven't really caught on to this yet. And I imagine that that might take a year or two.
Well, that'll be a nice rush of revenue once they realize what's happening.
I have a question.
Yeah, go for it.
I mean, we've been talking a lot about agents and kind of wondering, obviously agents are breaking through in the enterprise and the coding sector, but we've just been kind of tracking against like, when can you actually use an agent to just book a flight reliably? And I'm wondering if we're in this weird thing where you see a foundation model company do a press release and it's like, we're working on, fundamental math innovation, or we're going to solve, I forget that like really, really hard problem in math. And it seems like maybe there's a gap in the human RL training loop just around like a really good executive assistant. Is that the gap? Is it, we need more data there to actually break through, or is that just a product issue? Like, why can't Siri reliably book me a flight?
Yeah, so I think there's two challenges. One is the interest of researchers has historically been in these like super hard reasoning problems, right? They're interested in GPQA of how do we solve PhD level reasoning. They're interested in IMO level math of how do we have models that are beating all of these incredible mathematicians, and have historically just been less interested in like how do we automate a McKinsey consultant or an executive assistant. And I think that shift is starting to happen. And so that's like a big part of it. And that ties into the data that they create. Because of course, if you want to automate a McKinsey consultant, you need evals for everything a McKinsey consultant does. If you want to automate an EA, you need evals for everything that an EA does. I think the other part of it is the models are just starting to get really good at tool use. Like tool use is still relatively immature relative to all of the reasoning capabilities. And so I think as that starts to happen, I would really expect that this year you're able to use Operator or whatever the equivalent agent is to start booking flights and doing a lot of these more mundane tasks.
Have you ever been approached by any of the labs around help us make our models funny? Like, is there a world? Is there a world where you guys are you show up to the Comedy Store here in LA and you're trying to grab some
that's my
comedians
current
and say,
eval. Every time I try a new
come on,
LLM,
Mercor,
I'm like, tell me a joke.
We're gonna test how funny you are. We got some opportunities for you. If you can.
The Joe Rogan mothership, we just pull them right off stage. The Kill Tony bucket pulls. Hey, you got the joke book. Come on.
But it seems like that's like when every model's like pretty good at some of these sort of like foundational like problems and thinking, then the way to differentiate is can a model be more entertaining for consumers? And there's value in that itself.
Yeah, a lot of our customers at the frontier, as you've seen in recent releases, are starting to think a lot more about humor and these exciting things. We have been hiring a bunch of people out of like the Harvard Lampoon and equivalent places that have these comedic skills to help teach models how to get there. And so it's really like every capability you want, you need evals for.
John has been doing like the Coogan eval, which is just he asks various models to tell a joke, and then they end up just taking you on this winding thing that sounds like a joke, but it's not actually. It doesn't actually have a punchline.
I mean, it's hard because there's not a quantitative eval for humor. It's so subjective and so qualitative.
Another question, just related, just broadly to the future and how these labs. So the labs are your customers. The critique of the labs broadly and the model companies as they raise tens of billions of dollars has been, if the models are commoditizing and intelligence just becomes too cheap to meter, where does the value come from? John's point of view has been there are many commodities in the world that have a ton of value, and there's a bunch of great businesses that drill and produce oil and then sell it, right? Even though oil is like a commodity that just sort of trades on the open market. How do you see the model market long term, and do you see a world where there's constantly new companies being spun up to create these sort of bespoke, specialized models for different use cases?
Yeah, I think the value will accrue to the product layer. Like I don't think about OpenAI as much as an API business, and it seems like most people are really placing a bet on the product side of things, which will start to get very exciting, especially and spread out across many companies, considering that customizing models is so much more affordable than it used to be. So that's sort of how I see it playing out. I think one of the things that a lot of investors don't quite realize when they're not like in the code of building these products is how low the switching costs are for API, right? Like it's a line of code to switch back and forth and like see how new models are doing. And so it's hard to build a business when that's the switching cost. And I think it's really going to be in the product layer.
Well, I mean, given that, do you have a view on why every single ex-OpenAI employee seems to start the exact same foundation model company instead of doing something else? I was really hoping for like a supplements company from Ilya, or, you know, like a hair loss or something fun, something different, t-shirt company. But everyone just seems to be, hey, I'm going to do what I know. I've been building foundation models. I'm going to stick with it.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think a lot of it ties to just like the ideology around AGI, right?
Sure.
This is the most important problem in the world. And so how do we all race as fast as possible to get there rather than a lot of the, unit economics and competitive dynamics that investors would be thinking about?
Yeah, so they're basically just disregarding the fact that sure, the value might accrue to the application level or layer for 10 years, and then it's completely irrelevant once ASI arrives.
Yeah.
It's an interesting strategy if value in the short to medium term accrues to the product layer, but then if you actually can build artificial super intelligence, then none of it actually potentially matters in the end. So it's an interesting strategy. Last question for you. I know we have a minute left. This is the most champagne problem that founders ever have. And when you were fundraising, you probably couldn't even drink champagne. But do you have any funny stories? I'm sure you raised a series of like very competitive rounds. Do you have any funny stories of like offers investors made to just like try to get you? You know, the classic is like,
didn't you go on a helicopter?
Like the classic is like
was
you
a
have
helicopter. A private jet to Vegas to race Ferraris.
There you go.
There we go. I knew there was gonna be something.
Yeah.
You're like, I don't know. I never actually got my driver's license. They're like, it's fine. It's a private track.
Are those effective? Did they win you over? It sounds like you went with Benchmark after the helicopter thing, so maybe it's effective.
No, they could be very tempting because we never actually, for our Series A and our Series B, we didn't create a slide deck because we weren't both times like people asked for it and we were like just not really willing to create one. But the sales processes can be a lot of fun. It's sort of like Christmas where you're getting all of these gifts and fun experiences, but also trying to balance that with it not being too much of a distraction from building the company.
Well, that's fantastic.
Love it.
Congrats to you. Good luck. And we'll have to check in soon when you have new fundraising news.
Absolutely.
Every other week.
Let's
get them on a schedule.
Yeah, same time next week for the Series F. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
We'll make it happen, John. There we go.
Fantastic.
All right. Give our best to the team. Thanks for coming on.
Bye.
Thanks. See you guys.
This is great. This is a fun one.
Oh, to
We
be
didn't even get
21
into
again.
fellowship. Yeah, I know. 21, getting flown out to Vegas to fly Ferraris or fly helicopters and race Ferraris. That's very TB coded. Well, we got David Senra coming on the show. Going to ask him about NVIDIA. Going to ask him about Jensen Huang. Going to ask him about great founders. I'm going to ask him how he's doing today. How are you doing?
What's going on, brothers?
Looking fantastic.
Oh, amazing. Look at this. Look at this.
Professorial, if I might say
I honestly,
so myself.
99% of the time that I see Senra, he's got the black founders tee on.
Yeah.
It's good to see you in it's good to see you in a jacket.
That's great.
I know people say I shouldn't wear my own merch. I completely disagree.
Yeah.
Yeah. What?
It's the greatest merch in the world. It is honestly like one of the most comfortable t-shirts
to work out in.
Yeah.
If think about how important that random me and Jordy ran into each other after not talking for like 6 months.
True, yeah.
At gym in Malibu.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you would have recognized me if I didn't have without the founder shirt on. So
Well, now that you're doing video, you're a lot more recognizable. You're going to get stopped on the street all the time. I'm sure
let's
it's
hope
a
not.
dream that you've been waiting for.
no, let's hope not. Please don't.
Yeah. He only wants to get recognized in the Aman.
Yes,
that's the most common place that it happens, I'm sure.
Our friend Justin Mayers told me he's opening the new factory for Kettle and Fire, and he texted me last night. And he texted me where it is. I was like, "Is there a Mon in that city?" It's like Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
I'm on Lancaster.
Yeah.
I'm on Caster.
Yeah.
One of the most historic locations.
The Caster.
The Caster. That's great. What was the last episode you dropped?
Oh my God. It's the episode's actually going kind of crazy.
Okay.
Most people like it. Some people are very upset. It's Todd Graves, the founder of Raising Cane's.
Okay.
So Raising
Cool.
Cane's, this guy's been running his business for 30 years. He owns over 90% of it. It's worth at least $10 billion. And he truly believes that God put him on earth to be great at making chicken fingers so he can help other people.
Life's work.
And so a lot of people love his approach. He's essentially what I would describe as, I did this episode on the founder of In-N-Out a long time ago, Harry Snyder.
Yeah.
And it's essentially like Harry Snyder's reincarnated, but instead of making hamburgers, he's making chicken fingers. They have like the very same philosophy. But people are like really upset that he feels this is his mission. But he like does a ton of good for the community, like gives to charity, like let the guy make his fucking chicken fingers.
It's funny.
Yeah, so he basically just was building the company while he was still in college, right?
No, so there's an interesting thing that reoccurs at the history of entrepreneurship. Is like these founders write a business plan in business school about their idea, and they get terrible grades. So like Fred Smith, the founder of FedEx, C minus.
Yeah.
Todd Graves, lowest grade in the class. Phil Knight for Nike, same thing, bad grade. Completely disinterested.
The professors don't know. The professors don't know. I remember in college, I wrote a bull case on Twitter at like 1 billion and they got like a B minus. And they're like, just because he like disagreed with me on the valuation. And it's like, I was completely right. Yeah, I was completely correct.
100%. But the crazy thing about Todd Graves is like no one would give him money. So he never raised again. And so he raised from, he actually, to save money or to make money, he worked as a Boilermaker. And so they do these fucking crazy things where you have to work like 5 or 6 weeks because you're fixing a refinery. And every day the refinery's down is like very detrimental to the health of the company. So they pay you a ton of money, but you just have to work like a dog for like 100-hour weeks, 6 weeks straight. So he meets a bunch of Boilermakers. Then he risks his life doing commercial fishing. Do you remember this show like Deadliest Catch?
Deadliest Catch, yeah.
That's what he did. He did that
awesome.
when he was like 23.
Legend.
And then he goes and he borrows money from his bookie and then a Boilermaker named Wild Bill. So he never talks about this anymore, but I know I love the idea like there's some Boilermaker named Wild Bill out there that has like a couple $100 million worth of Raising Cane stock, or his bookie made like $100 or $200 million just because his kid wouldn't shut up. His 23-year-old kid wouldn't shut up about wanting to live a chicken finger dream. That's what he repeats over and over again. Chicken finger dream.
Chicken finger dream.
And those guys have the 10% of Raising Cane's?
No, he never says the percentages. Who has the rest of the he says over 90%. But you know, he said he rolled him into the main company because they just invested in the first Raising Cane's. Another thing that's interesting, he had a co-founder who quit after the second store.
Ooh.
Oof.
Miss.
No conviction.
There's always a story like that with like all these power law companies.
No, it's interesting. It's funny. Restaurants and CPG are so tangible that it attracts people that have dreams, but not necessarily extreme conviction.
Sure.
They can see the idea in their head. And there's a sandwich shop in LA, and I've sat down. I'm blanking on the name right now, but they've got probably 20, 30 locations around the West Coast now. And he was just telling me how the first year he had been a successful restaurateur. He had multiple locations. He had done nightclubs and all this stuff. And then the first year of his business, he went into massive debt. He was working 14 hours a day. He went into this business like knowing food and beverage really, really well. And it was just the most devastating like couple years where it didn't matter that they were making a good product and people liked it. He was getting, he was having high schoolers sort of like talk smack to him, saying like, make my sandwich faster, like getting angry at him. And so it just like, it weeds out the people that don't have that like ridiculous, didn't have, maybe the co-founder didn't have the chicken finger dreams.
Listen, I think the episode's like an hour long. So if you listen to it on 1.5x speed, you can get it in 40 minutes. It's exactly that. He almost lost. So he was like heavily geographically concentrated in Louisiana. And he almost lost everything in during Hurricane Katrina because it knocked out 21 of his 28 restaurants. And it was all personal debt. So no one would lend him money. So he'd have to go find like an angel investor. He had a very interesting way to finance each individual store. Where he's like, hey, invest like 200 grand in this. He would take that. He called it an angel investment, but it's really an angel investment. He's like, give me 200 grand. I will fill out a 1-page contract. I will guarantee you personally that I will pay you back your money and 15% interest. He would take that contract to the bank. The bank would loan him like $1 million to give him the startup money. And he did that all the way up until the first 20 restaurants. And he was like, we're rolling. We have so much cash flow. Nothing's going to go wrong as long as I don't lose out on any day sales. And then Hurricane Katrina comes and knocks out, 21 out of 28 restaurants. And so he talks about, he says this over and over again. He's just like, don't do the things I did because they were wildly reckless. They just happened to work out for me, which I thought was also really funny.
Now, he's still alive. Are you planning on doing one of those episodes where you go sit down with him, have dinner, eat some chicken fingers, break it down?
So I said on the episode, if anybody knows him, please, I would like to meet him because I'm obsessed. Like you guys know this because we talk all the time. Like I'm obsessed with people that do one thing. The only thing I'm really interested in is like, I'm not interested in your stupid fucking startup or your latest company. I'm interested in your last company. Like the thing that you were going to do until that you thought you were put here on the earth to do, and the thing that you're going to do until you die. And so, I'm fascinated by talking to people like that. Most of the most interesting, like unknown founders that I've met recently, the most impressive ones are all in like their 70s. And they've been building their company for 40 or 50 years. You just talk to them, it's like the level of detail they know about the world they've built is like it's one of the most unique experiences you can have in your life because that compounded knowledge, there's things that they know that they can't even really explain why they believe what they believe, but it's just like a very like deep sense of intuition. Jensen is the same. I would imagine the same way. Like I think he's the longest running tech CEO, if I'm not mistaken.
My question is, do you think that these founders who wind up running their companies for 40 years know it's their life's work in the first month, in the first decade?
No.
Do they fall into it? And because I feel like a lot of it's just luck. Like no one ever made them an offer they couldn't refuse. They never wound up being in a situation where they had to, pay some bill and they wanted to cash out or something.
So I don't think they know it that early. Now that is separate from like Todd Graves, right? It was just like, he's been offered billions of dollars. And he's like, I never thought of it for a second. What I also love about him is he talks about the need. We need more founders and we need more entrepreneurs to not sell their company. And so he's like, I'm competing. The reason he's like running through the QSR industry right now is because like he's competing against these very old corporate run businesses. There's no founders competing against him. And he's just like, we need more diversity of thought. We need more ideas. You need more innovation. You need people to actually care. And so if somebody asked him, like, you've been offered billions of dollars, what was the offer that was the most tempting? He's like, none of them. Nothing was ever tempting. He's like, this is going to be a multi-generational business. I'm going to give it to my kids. So let me give you another hilarious story about this.
Please.
And I'm going to paraphrase this, but so James Dyson, who still owns 100% of Dyson, which I've done 4 episodes on, right? It's my number one autobiography recommendation out of the almost 400 biographies of entrepreneurs I've read so far is James Dyson's first autobiography, which is called Against the Odds. Like a few weeks ago, so he still owns 100% of the company. The numbers you see thrown out there, they say, oh, it's worth 10 billion, it's worth 20. I've heard he's pulling out 5 billion a year, more than 5 billion a year dividends personally, from what I hear. Okay,
that's amazing.
So I was at this like super fancy invite.
What does
only,
he do with it? Where's he investing? Does he have a family office or something? Like,
so that's how. Yeah, so. There'll be hints because like he's been pulling out a ton of money.
Oh, it turns out he owns 5% of Apple now because he's just been building a position for a decade. Like
no, way better than that. Okay. He's like owns more.
Federal Reserve.
He owns the most sheep than anybody in the world.
I love it. Yeah, like, you got to be sheep maxing. You have to be sheep maxing.
You run out of things to invest in. So he's the largest green pea producer in Europe. Like it's
amazing.
So there's
true
a funny
wealth.
story about this there. So I'm at this like super fancy invite only investor conference. There's like 15 people there, and all of them like controlling massive amounts of capital. And one guy was telling a story like the more assets under management, they're trying to buy private businesses. And you start out buying $500 million businesses, then $1 billion businesses. Now he's got to shoot really, really fucking high. And so I'm going to paraphrase this. This is why I love people like James Dyson, like Bloomberg, Michael Bloomberg, like Todd Graves. Steve Jobs is obviously is similar though, even though it's a public company. They approach Dyson to see, would you be interested in selling? And the response, I'm paraphrasing, was, "Fuck you. This is a family heirloom."
I love it.
Like, I'm not selling for any price. So there's actually a really important idea here. And I think another way to answer your question, John, is I realized I remember exactly where I was. You guys have both met my wife. I was supposed to be on a date with her at Harry's Pizzeria in the Design District in Miami, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not even paying attention to what we're talking about. I'm thinking about founders. And I remember like it just where I was, like the epiphany I had was like, oh, people say if like you love what you do, like you would do it for free.
Yeah.
And I was like, no. There's a different level. If you there's you can have such a deep love for what you're doing that people couldn't pay you to stop.
Yeah.
So it's like the idea has like
we talked about this yesterday.
Yep.
How much would you have to pay Steve Jobs to not work on Apple or build products? There's no money. You couldn't give him $2 trillion. It didn't matter.
This was the sort of the Zuck acquisition attempt.
Yeah.
They said, hey, here's $1 billion. You're 23 or something. And he's like, but I would just start another social network. This is what I want to work on. Like, what am I going to do? I like this one. Amazing.
That is the perfect example because there's a bunch of young kids that, you know, sell their companies, have a bunch of money. But like, look at the difference of his life. No one would know his name. Who knows what would happen? It's like now he's like working, you know, the best 40-year-old public company CEO in the world by far.
Yeah.
Working in the most interesting time, having access to like build some of the most interesting products, and then essentially unlimited resources.
Yeah.
Yeah. Question. Todd Graves, I'm sure, has like an extreme loyalty to his team and employees at the corporate level and the individual restaurant level. There's sort of a broader trend playing out in restaurants. People have been attacking the sort of like one of the biggest cost centers for restaurants or probably the biggest is labor. And so you have, we covered yesterday, Yum Brands, which is like a $44 billion public company. They own KFC, Taco Bell, Pizza Hut. They're trying to integrate sort of robotics on both sides, both on the ordering process. They're partnering with NVIDIA to like do like voice models and process, you know, you're driving through the drive-through or calling or texting or whatever. And then they also are trying to integrate robotics on, within the actual kitchens just to produce food more cheaply. How do you think Todd Graves, I haven't found any commentary from him online about robotics, but how do you think he would think about that in a world where I'm sure he has a deep loyalty to his team and loves that it's sort of this human experience going to a Raising Cane's, but at the same time, his competitors are just going to be like trying to drive costs down as low as possible?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd love to ask him that. Based on what he says, like he's pretty anti making decisions just based on financial reasons. Like he talks a lot of shit in his interviews about like PE people, he's just he's not a fan at all.
Whoa. We love private equity here on this show. Okay, let's not slander the good folks over at Blackstone.
Dude, two of my closest friends who I love and I talk to all the time, they are literally might be the most successful PE people rolling up QSRs. Patrick just did an interview with Matt and Alex. Yeah. So I love them too. Yeah. But Todd Graves does not. He is very anti-PE in QSRs.
Timeline in turmoil if they start chirping each other. I have a question about your point about founder control over the long term, never selling, owning 100%. Do you think that there's a need for some sort of maybe cultural shift or even a shift in the way startups are financed in Silicon Valley? It's just so like the standard YC playbook, for example, is like you get 3 co-founders, you split it equally, then immediately YC takes 10%, then it's like back to back 20% rounds, you're diluted down to a few percent. Maybe you get some super voting, but you're not paying yourself a good salary. And so, Jordy's kind of talked about maybe we need to normalize some sort of secondary sale so that the founders can take a little cash out of the business and then actually go in it for the really long term. Maybe we just need, hey, it's okay to pay yourself a really like reasonable salary. A lot of founders are out there kind of like starving even after they've raised $20 million. What do you think about the structure of Silicon Valley? Like, is the Silicon Valley playbook setting us up to create the next James Dyson or the next or the next Todd Graves?
So when you say, what do I think about that? I don't think about it. So it's really bizarre to me. Again, like I have an unfair advantage because essentially I just talk to dead people all day. I have one-sided conversations with history's greatest founders, right? So like for like the first 4 or 5 hours of my day, I'm usually just reading biographies. And then I usually have lunch. And then in the afternoon, I like reread highlights of the stuff I read over the last 8 years while I'm building the podcast. And one of the main lessons from all that is just like they do, like the people that usually get to the top of their profession or the best at what they do what's best for them regardless of what works for other people. And so the weird thing that I have is like when I open up Twitter and people are arguing about like you should raise from this person or you shouldn't raise at all or you should do this. It's just like you should do whatever's best whatever is best for like whatever mission you happen to be on. So I don't have like an opinion of like how other people should do it, other than like what do you actually want to do, and then figure out what's the best way to go about doing that. And then this is my issue is like remember when Paul Graham released like the founder mode episode or
Sure.
essay? So many people sent it to me and like asked me what I thought of it. It's just like it was a bizarre reading, and I'm a huge fan of his essays in general, but I just think like it missed which something that he obviously knows, which is like it just depends on who the founder is as a person. Like one of my favorite lines, it was in this random book on Steve Jobs. I've done like, I don't know, 10 or 12 episodes on Steve. And it said that Apple is just Steve Jobs with 10,000 lives. And I think like the good news, like one of the best benefits of being a founder is like you get to create your own world from scratch. You get to choose like what you work on, who's around you, how you go about doing everything. And so I would start with like, what do you actually want to do in the world? And then work backwards from that. So like I am like obsessed with control. So us three talk basically every day, and especially about what's going on with like TBPN. I told you what's going to fucking happen because it's happened to me. It's like you guys are blowing up. Your podcast is going to get a ton of attention. All the people in your audience want to do deals. They're investors, they're entrepreneurs. They're going to come to you with all this crazy shit because they did the same thing. And for me, it's just like I had an insane amount of investment opportunity, people offering to invest in the podcast or I would acquire it. And like I said no to all of them because the most important thing to me is like control for the long term. I believe this is my life's work. Just like Todd Graves on a chicken finger dream. I believe I was put here to do this. I think I'm the right person at the right place with the right set of skills at the right time. And like I was watching yesterday, I was watching my son turned 5 and he's obsessed with dinosaurs, right? And so I was like, oh, it's a good idea. Let's watch Jurassic Park. I didn't fucking realize how scary that movie is for a 5-year-old.
Yeah, it's so scary.
I tried to do that once too. I was like, oh, Jurassic Park,
Yeah,
dinosaurs. My
scary.
son loves dinosaurs.
Yeah.
It's dinosaur time.
It's
And then I'm like,
dinosaur
oh, pump the brakes.
Yeah, but I had the thought because like you see the computers and like everything else, and like, wait a minute, this movie came out in '93.
Yeah.
And like, if I wanted to do what I'm doing now, 20 years ago, and you guys too, what would you have to do?
Yeah.
You'd have to go to a physical building and be like, please put me on the air.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
just
it'd be
so
impossible.
important that like we're doing this at the right time. So
Yeah.
again, for me, it didn't matter. Like the money was not what I'm optimizing for. It was the control and the long-term control because I want to do this until I die. And so for me, it's like control is way more important than money.
Yeah, I think the question maybe you were getting at it is at a high level is, are we losing the like true generational founders because they do 4 back-to-back rounds and then they own 10% of their company and they've got a big board and somebody comes and says, hey, you're experiencing all this like, craziness. We'll just buy the company. You'll do an earn out and then you're going to be like worth $100 million.
$100 million, you get the
but the
pad,
question,
and
when you look at, the Mark Zuckerberg example, it's somebody who maintained extreme control despite doing a bunch of venture rounds. And I feel like many founders aspired to that path over the last 20 years, 15 years, whatever.
I know a guy with 8 board seats. Wouldn't recommend it, but it is a path to control.
Yeah, that's
Little
one
silly.
path.
No, I think like the main thing is like you find something you want to do. Like again, I don't think you could pay Zuck to not work at Meta, right?
Yeah,
He's got all the money. I've just admired people that do things for a very long time. Some of these people, I talk to a lot of PE people. One of my friends has the funniest lines. I think that's just like he says, VC gets all the attention, PE gets all the money, and his whole point was just like VC's so loud. Most of like all the media is obsessed with like fundraising and everything else. So to a founder, it looks like this is everything that's going on. I have a weird like vantage point in the founder like, ecosystem because like, yeah, a lot of tech people listen to the podcast, but a lot of people like that have billion like multi-billion-dollar family companies listen to the podcast. So like there's just a ton of businesses out there. Some of them raise money, some of them don't. I don't think you're losing anything. I just think there's a
I think one of the
there's like a what's the word I'm looking for? It's like there's just a lot of noise that doesn't exactly represent like everything that's going on.
Yeah. The next Todd Graves or the next James Dyson might be quietly building out there some behemoth that we're just not even hearing about because there's no VCs chattering about it.
So I just tweeted this out where it's just like I had
Midjourney's kind of like that, no outside capital. People know about it, but Midjourney could become some behemoth that David Holes just owns.
If you're not raising, like there's a reason that you have to be loud if you're constantly having to raise money. Like, so I just did this tweet. It was like I had dinner with one of the wealthiest people in the world, and his family has commissioned 2 biographies It's for the family
Love
use
this
only,
one. We
right?
covered this in the
Yeah.
show,
And I was like, dude, and we got along. Like we had a fucking fantastic dinner. I thought he was charismatic, smart, great storyteller. I'm gonna hang out with him again in the 70s. And I was like, dude, let me get those biographies. Like I would do such a good job. He's like, absolutely not. I have no interest in educating my competitors. I've met a ton of founders like this where I get to go to their company offsite. I've toured their warehouses, gone to their company, and they're usually all family-owned businesses. And I'm always like, you're so fucking talented. Why don't you write an autobiography? Why don't you do something? And they're absolutely not. They're just very, very quiet because there's no reason to make noise. There's also, it's also dangerous where this is something Charlie Munger said that was fascinating, where he thought it was against human nature for him and Warren to be so wealthy and so loved. And his point was that there's that greed doesn't run the world. Charlie has a great line. He says, greed doesn't run the world, envy does.
Yeah.
And so when you're really wealthy, there's a lot of envy. And so it's actually smart to not advertise that.
Yeah, that makes no sense.
Yeah. So I think it's just.
Can we flip it over to Jensen? I want to know, I mean, obviously he's in the news. He put on the Super Bowl of artificial intelligence, made a bunch of announcements at NVIDIA GTC. And I wanted to know, where do you see gaps between Jensen's archetype as a founder from maybe the other Magnificent Seven founders, the Steve Jobs of the world, the Zuck of the world, whoever else you've studied? Where are the similarities and differences?
I think they're more similar to each other than they are to like, obviously they're more similar to each other than they are to like the general population. I don't think there's a single founder that I've covered that is like the only one. Like he's got a lot of interesting ideas. Like they're all usually, what would be considered like micromanagers. They're obsessed with the details. Yeah. Like the Todd Graves example, right? He's got 50,000 employees, 800 stores. He's opening like 100 stores every year. And before he does the interview, like he interrupts the interview so he can approve the Instagram reel that's going out.
Wow.
Same thing with Steve Jobs did the same thing where like there's a great book called Insanely Simple, which talks about this. And it didn't matter if it was like a billboard in Missouri or a full page ad in the Wall Street Journal. Steve Jobs would approve every single ad before it came out. And then he'd be calling up. So the guy that wrote this book called Insanely Simple was the guy that was actually running Steve Jobs ads. And he says, Steve would call me at fucking midnight. And we'd be debating for an hour over a single word. So
doesn't feel like that's happening anymore at Apple.
No,
it's been a little messy lately.
No. So I think Jensen's the same way. What I thought was most interesting about him, he is definitely one of the more extreme. Like he is, every single person I cover on Founders is hardcore and extreme. Yep. He is, and he's unusual. He's uncommon amongst uncommon people. One of my favorite things that he said was that he likes to torture people to greatness. I thought that was like a really interesting line. And his whole point was like, people kind of like clip through people and fire people really fast. If he felt somebody had potential and they're just fucking up, like he's just going to torture them into greatness. He's going to make them great. And what you realize is the longer you read this book, there's a book called NVIDIA Way by Tay Kim, which is the one I did the episode on. What you realize is he does that to himself. He's tortured himself to greatness, where there's a great story in the book where they had won a blowout quarter. They absolutely fucking killed it. And he comes in and he tells his team, he's like, every morning I wake up, look in the mirror, and I say, you suck.
I love that.
The manifestation or visualization.
Something odd. How do you square his micromanagement with his he's stated that he doesn't have one-on-one meetings very often. He is a very kind of scattered organization. It's an interesting thing. It's kind of like you just dive into a specific thing. How do you think about it?
Yeah, he's got 60 direct reports, I think, in the book.
Yeah,
I think when they start writing the book, it's like 30, and I think it goes up to 60 because the book just came out. It's like it covers stuff up until like the recent last few months.
Yeah.
He actually has a great way to describe this that is most interesting, where people are saying like, how are we going to handle all these agents when they're smarter than we are? And he's like, I'm already doing that. He goes, my 60 direct reports are agents. They're all smarter at what they're in charge of than I am, and yet I'm able to direct them. There's a great line. Let me see if I can find it. He has this line where he says something about the company has to be like an F1
pit crew, probably.
Well, he's describing the way like he organizes it, and essentially like nobody he designs. He believes the founder or the leader should design the company not for like what's necessarily best like after they leave, but literally what's best for what they're doing now. He says, ultimately, my e-staff, which is his direct reports, ultimately, my e-staff is something that I have to know how to work with. The company's organization is like a race car. It has to be a machine that the CEO knows how to drive. And so if you think about it, it's like he made an F1 organization that is tailor suited to him and may not be, it's obviously not going to be tailor suited to the person that takes over after him.
I have a totally separate but somewhat related question in that a certain high-profile investor sold a huge stake in NVIDIA in 2019 that would be worth $160 billion as of last year. That person is Masayoshi Son. You haven't done an episode on Masa? Feels
No,
like
I won't. I fucking won't. So this, I sometimes I get sad because I feel like the great thing about podcasting is like you actually know the person. Like when people meet you and you guys and me, they're like, "Oh, I feel like I know you." It's like you've heard me talk for 100 fucking hours. You do know me, right?
Yeah.
And so I had so many people that listen to the podcast. Like, there's this new first English biography of Masa called The Gambler. You have to do it. It's gonna be a great episode. And I started reading it, and I was like, "Oh, this is interesting." He's kind of like nutty. And then this happened this week. This was supposed to be the next episode of Founders. And no, listen, rule number 2 in the Senra family is mind your own business. So like, I don't care what other people do for a living. I don't care how they do it. It really doesn't bother me. I wind up fucking hating this guy halfway through the book.
Oh no.
Like I found it disgusting. Like, and it's like, so we have a bunch of mutual friends. We've spent a lot of time together. We're like legit friends off camera, right? We talk all the time. I'd be very concerned if I like ran into people and like, Coogan's a fucking liar. He's fucked me over. The entire book, the first half of the book, is all these people that Masa did business with. That is like, that guy lies all the time. He screwed me over. So then I fast forward and I read the last chapter, and it's like he's super depressed. He's like, I've wasted my life. He says I have an ugly face, which is kind of weird. And he's just like, and would you realize like he was just so obsessed with. He is a legit gambler, and it's like a sad existence. He didn't build a product that made somebody else's life better. He didn't do any of that. And so I was like, I don't give a fuck about sunk cost of spending half a week. If I'm going to make an episode on this guy, that means I have to live inside his world for like another 40 hours. And I'm just not willing to do that. So I just threw the book across the side of the room. I was like, I'm not doing this.
Crazy.
Wow.
That makes sense.
Let's, I'm glad that you have a beautiful face, and it's always great to have you on the show. Thanks. We'll have to have you back soon. This is fantastic.
It's great seeing you in a jacket. I'll say it again.
Appreciate it.
Now that you set the bar, make sure. Hey, this summer when we're doing this live in person in Malibu,
fantastic. I mean, seriously, we still have to do the GOAT debate, the greatest entrepreneur of all time. We have a bunch of. We've been debating it in a chat room for a while.
Let's do that in person.
We have to
in tuxedos. If it's the GOAT debate, we have to take it one
with
step
a bottle of
above
Dom Perignon. Hopefully. I would love
that. That's right.
Well, thanks for stopping by, David. This is fantastic.
All right, guys.
Great to see you.
Always great chat.
We'll talk later.
We'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Love you.
Bye.
Love you too.
Fantastic.
I told David last time we talked, he ended the call. He's like, love you guys. And I was like, if you're just tuning into the show for the first time and you're a Senra fan, and it's great. It's crazy about Masa. It makes sense.
We'll have to get Delian's take on Masa.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that
I think David changes his tune if Masa comes in and says, "Hey, look, we're going to lever you up. We're going to take Founders Podcast. We're going to put 20 billion in at 100 billion pre, and we're really going to take this to the next level." I think David all of a sudden says, "Well, yeah, that's enough to live at an Amman for the rest of my life," and so he does it.
No, there's no
price.
Can't,
you can't buy him out.
There's no price. Masa could get us on his side if he took PETA into for-profit.
That would be a fantastic move. I would love that. Anyway, I think we got Delian in the Temple of Technology. Welcome to the show, Delian. How you doing?
What's going on?
What's up, boys? Thanks for having me on again. Excited to catch up.
Appreciate it. We're calling this Delta V with Delian. Our little space update. We're still workshopping the name, but we got to come on. We got to come up with a catchy, pithy phrase for all the regular guests. But very excited to have you here. Can you give us an update? Let's start with the rescued astronauts. You got community noted. The ex-Army really came out for you. How'd you process the landing? Break it down for us.
I already have enough of an ego that I don't need to like, overly, sort of praise myself even more. But all I'm going to say is, they go up, I forget the exact timing, but like, beginning of June last year,
Yep.
I send out this tweet that's like end of June where I was just like losing my mind because I was like, how is nobody talking about this? Like these guys are like totally stuck up there. It's clear that like, Boeing and NASA clearly are panicking and realize that like they can't take these guys down on Starliner and nobody's even begun a plan for how to bring these guys down. And so I tweet basically like, hey, why is nobody talking about the fact that there's like 2 American astronauts like stranded in orbit? And like, look, if it were like Apollo days or like space shuttle days, and like they were stuck up there for an extended period of time, people would 100% be using like the word stranded. And so I was just like so confused as to why like this just was getting no attention. And then I literally just felt like I was being fucking lied to, and I get community noted, and it's like, oh, like they're totally fine. They're doing some like final checkouts on Starliner. I'm like, has anybody like read the comms that NASA and Boeing are putting out? Like this thing's clearly in like a very bad state. Definitely in no way they actually like decide to bring astronauts, sort of down on it. And the word stranded had not yet been used a single time in any like NASA comms, in anybody's like comms about the entire mission. Within 24 hours of my tweet going viral, NASA put out a press release explicitly saying the astronauts are not stranded. And like then the word
No way.
stranded became like totally in the lexicon around the mission.
Yep.
I'd like to think that it had something to do with that, sort of viral tweet. Maybe there were other people that,
Let's
sort of
go.
influenced it. And then got even like literally, the White House's communications this past week said, we brought back the stranded astronauts. So I'm going to claim credit on stranded being the case. The entire thing to me was, sort of crazy, not to give, there's a lot of history that we could give here, but like, when Commercial Crew was originally getting started, the original plan by NASA was to only, do it as a sole source award just to Boeing. SpaceX was seen as a bunch of, cowboys, hoo-haws that had no chance of actually being able to be trusted with, sort of human astronauts on board. They actually had to delay the announcement because in like the final hours, they basically decided to do it as a split award where they gave Boeing, by the way, it's crazy. Like they literally just gave Boeing twice the price per seat. So it's just like Boeing, it's like, hey, the price is like $10 for SpaceX, and for Boeing, it's $20. And like, we're just going to pay them more. Why? Because, it's because Boeing has a 200-person lobbying team. And so there was like a very near world where like we only had Boeing as the only option. It was only like in the final hours of that program that like SpaceX was, sort of given an alternative. And like, thank God, otherwise like we would have been begging the Russians to bring our astronauts back. And, it's a little tricky to do when you're also like, providing, weapons to their, enemy. So, that would have been
Was
like
this-
pretty geopolitically
was this-
thing.
A lot of people, would say this was political. Was it? Do you think these astronauts are coming back like deeply radicalized? Like, are they? You're up in space a long time. You got a lot of time to think. I don't know how the internet connection is up there. if there even is one, they don't have necessarily the bandwidth to doom scroll. Are they coming back sort of like deeply? Are they going to be like kept off camera? Like, you guys got to kind of stay off the mics for a while you cool off, or what do you think their reaction is to the whole thing?
Well, now that it's the Trump administration, I don't think that Trump will, sort of limit them from the mics. But I think what's incredibly clear is SpaceX offered to bring the astronauts back sooner. And because it was in the midst of the election cycle and because Musk was campaigning for Trump, the Biden administration turned down that offer. There's a whole lot of fucking, jackos and wahoos that will try and convince you otherwise. Hey, this is the pre-existing ISS schedule. This is when Dragon was scheduled to go up, etc. So they had to stay up there. No way. If somebody had gone to Elon and said, yes, like according to the standard NASA budgetary process, this was supposed to fly then, but like one of the astronauts has like, bone density issues and is having health problems up there. We want to bring her down like this week because it was planned to be like a 3-week long mission, not a 9-month long mission. They 100% could have done that. The Biden administration very much so tried to challenge those, sort of facts and deny that. Dems today even have tried to deny that. Crazy is like typically NASA astronauts, at least in the like, past 20 years, have not ever really made even the slightest inklings of political statements. Butch and Sunni like basically confirmed these facts. Like they basically made it clear, hey, we could have been brought back earlier, and we were like denied the opportunity to be brought back earlier. And if I were them, I'd be pretty pissed because like, Sunni, I believe, like did suffer bone density issues and was not supposed to be up there, sort of for that long. And so I wouldn't be surprised if you've already seen them push the fold on what they've been willing to say behind the mic. I wouldn't be surprised if they like do that even more now that they're on the ground and you're in a Trump administration.
Do you think that NASA has a talent crisis? You could imagine that Boeing is finding it difficult to compete on, getting the best talent when there's SpaceX and Varda and all these other players that are sort of competing for the best and brightest in the world. I imagine NASA is very prestigious, but at the same time, you're going to work in this government organization and there's a bureaucracy and, you know, if you're 22 years old right now and your hero is Elon Musk, and Elon Musk is beefing on the timeline with NASA, like where are you going to go, right?
Yeah, I mean, I do think they have a real challenge. They also have a bit of an identity crisis where they are turning more and more to buyers of commercial off-the-shelf hardware versus like developers of it. And so what does that transition look like? But then if you only have people internally that are just buyers and don't have an engineering background, how do you know that they're buying the best stuff? At the same time, look, like, NASA also like flew a helicopter on fucking Mars.
Yeah.
That's insane. Like that's like
Yeah.
a crazy capability. Nobody else would be capable of doing that. Yes, they worked with AeroVironment as like the contractor for that, but they had like such a heavy hand in that. They're now talking about like flying a helicopter on Mars. They did like the, sort of 6 minutes of what is it called? Like when the Curiosity rover came down, like the 6 minutes of, hell or whatever it is.
Yeah.
They're like, literally using like retro boosters to like sky crane down a rover. So like there's a lot that NASA does that is like requires crazy talent. But I think what they need to, sort of go through, and I think like, Trump administration is likely aligned with this, Jared Isaacman, the likely incoming administrator, is NASA needs to basically just focus on two core parts. One, the core of space capabilities, they just become buyers of, and they just buy things off the shelf. And then where they're developing technologies directly themselves, it should only be the really radical, super far out things, right? Like there's just not commercial space companies that are like talking about like, we're going to build like off the shelf Mars helicopters. Like
Yeah, we
that's
talked
like,
about this. We talked about this last time. Like asteroid deflection is something that NASA should work on because it's not that commercial, right? It's like we maybe need to do it once every 50 years, hopefully not, and then and NASA, you can be the hero.
Yeah,
exactly.
Can we move on to the continuing resolution? Can you break that down for us?
Yeah. I mean, it kind of relates to some of the NASA stuff too, where it's been interesting to see. This quarter feels like it's been the most active in sort of defense tech, aerospace investing in a long time. Some of which feels rational, some of which feels sort of crazy over the top. And it's just interesting to have this like massive flow of capital, from venture investors going into this field, while at the same time the flow of capital from DC literally has been halted, right?
Yeah.
So for the sort of less informed viewers, ultimately defense tech and aerospace companies that are selling to the government, yes, there's commercial sort of use cases for these technologies. Those aren't related to government budgets, but are ultimately a lot of these reliant on government budgets. About 10 days ago, the House and Senate agreed upon a year-long continuing resolution. And so what that basically means is both the House and the Senate had previously passed budgetary bills that increased basically defense spending, had various NASA spending, et cetera. Couldn't come to an alignment on that, couldn't come to an alignment with the presidents. And so the ultimate, sort of call by all parties was we're actually just going to freeze to whatever fiscal year 24 levels, basically are. Now, in that CR, they did give the DoD, hey, we know that you guys are thinking about like, sort of reprogramming. And so as you're shifting budgets around, make sure that it reflects whatever like, House appropriators, and, Senate appropriators basically had in those budgets that they basically put out, sort of end of February. But in the grand scheme of things, this mostly means a freezing of new ads, any new programs. And as you can imagine, who's the biggest, sort of beneficiary of that? Well, incumbents have their programs continuing to be funded, right? And so the, Lockheed's, Raytheon's, et cetera, Northrop's, might not be experiencing as much growth as usual, but, they're generally, continuing to be funded versus all of the net new entrants, while are experiencing massive inflows of venture capital dollars, have literally been told by the U.S. government, like, expect zero stars. And so it's just a little odd to me that that's not a thing that is being talked about by all these people that are talking about, like, the Gundo, dynamism, this, that. It's like,
well, who talks the most on X? It's founders and investors, and neither have an incentive to really say like, hey, by the way, none of us are making anything back anytime soon.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. As like a paranoid founder, I like to talk about this stuff because I want to make sure that like the thing that I'm working on, survives for a very long time and is like sustainable. But like to be clear, what this means practically is like, basically this year's budget, was basically end September 31st is completely frozen. Now what's being, begun to be worked on is like the fiscal year, so 26 vehicle. That's going to, first have to come from like, sort of the president, putting forth, sort of a plan that you'd expect to make it over to, sort of the House and Senate in like roughly the May period. That means it's going to make it onto the floor in like, sort of June, July. Hopefully gets passed by like September, October. Realistically, though, we basically have not hit that September 31st deadline for the past, I don't even know what it is, like 10 plus years. And so that continuing resolution is probably going to extend for at least another 30, potentially 60 days. So, potentially until the end of the year. That means that like new budget actually doesn't start until, basically January of next year. And so all these companies that are raising all this capital for all these things that they would like to start, yes, there's going to be reprogramming. Yes, like the president is, doing shipbuilding and CAA, et cetera. But like a lot of this stuff is very much so frozen. And, what people don't realize is, let's say, you have, sort of CAA or CCA, sorry, and, sort of shipbuilding. Those 5-year plans that the DoD put together, where they were like, look, in order to do the early R&D in 2024, we need 100 million. In 25, we need 200 million. In 26, we need 300 million. Well, because we're now frozen at 24 levels, that means it's only 124 and 125. So now when you're looking at 26, it's like, are you making up for the fact that 25, sort of was, low, and you're trying to scale all the way to 26? You're like in a real budgetary hole. So like new programs are also in a way worse state, because it's typically the new programs that are the ones that are growing. And so if it's flat, you're both trying to figure out, do you make up for last year, and how do you keep up with like what the program needs? Or are you like really pushing out milestones? But if you're pushing out milestones, now is it relevant to Taiwan if people are thinking about that needing to be ready in 2027, 2028? And so does that now make the DoD just want to keep shifting budget to incumbent programs that can deliver by 27, 28, even if they're not as capable, right? So there's just like a lot of things where it's just like, I'm obviously mega bull on like the team at Anduril, because like they have the like bench, the capability, the, set of different product suites, different programs going, like they will navigate this. But like, I don't know if there's going to be like 5 Andurils, and I think VCs are investing like there's going to be, sort of 5 Andurils right now, but without even understanding like the basics of like the budgetary, sort of process on the Hill. They're just, sort of slinging checks, based off of, the zip code of where somebody's office is.
If you're an American dynamism defense tech investor, are you looking at, are you seeing more pitches in Europe right now? If the Anduril of Anduril is Anduril here in the US, but then Europe is like remilitarizing, at least Western Europe. Are you seeing pitches come in? Would people just kind of divert dollars over there because there's potentially a lot more willingness to spend?
I think you're starting to see that happen. Obviously, both the Overton window has changed there. That like, sort of budget, sort of growth there is insane. And if you think that like US incumbents are like stodgy, old school, et cetera, EU incumbents are like, sort of that, jacked up to the nines. And so I do think there's a real opportunity there. There aren't a ton of like super competent players. And so, I wouldn't say that like the quality of what we get, sort of inbound, at least at Founders Fund, is, something, super high in Europe. The thing that I will say though is at least the biggest check that I've ever, sort of led is like a net new, portfolio company investment. So not just like follow-ons. Obviously, we've deployed mega checks into Ramp, but that was after doing seed and Series A. But we're investing about $36 million into basically a European aerospace defense, sort of type player. And that's our first check into the company. Now, part of it is that the company was already performing very well, irrespective of the EU tailwinds. And then now with reindustrialization, et cetera, we're like even more bullish, sort of on the, company. But we're also getting to do it at a price that is like highly differentiated relative to like the, 94129, sort of, sorry, shoot, that's the SF, sort of zip code. 056, sort of zip code.
With all this turmoil at the DoD and with the budget and the continuing resolution, is it more important than ever that these companies figure out commercial applications? We talked to a company, Albedo, they're a satellite company yesterday. It seemed like even if the government doesn't want to buy the ISR capabilities, there are hedge funds and oil and gas providers that want, high resolution images from VLEO. And so is that something that you've thought about this at Varda with the pharma and DoD contracts. How do you think about that? And is that more important going forward?
Yeah, but I think it's like one of these things that's like very, sort of hard to pivot to depending on how you've set up your business, right?
Sure.
So, take a business and say like Saronic. I'm not sure there's that many commercial use cases for, sort of small scale autonomous surface vessels, or take a company, like Apex that is, mostly selling, sort of commercial satellites. Now, some of them are to like, various defense groups, but they also have a bunch of commercial sales, right? So
Sure.
I think it's one of these things that it's really hard to like pivot from one approach to the other. Maybe somebody like Palantir has clearly shown it, where they were super DoD focused for a long time and now have a massive commercial business. But that felt like it happened at like the very, very late stages of the company. I think your ability to like pivot from, either being dual use from the get-go or being defense from the get-go, you kind of have to choose one. And we've obviously chosen the like, sort of dual use from the get-go. Does that give us some cons when it comes to like defense programs? Yeah, because like we're not as willing to like change around our architecture to totally match defense needs. But the pros is also in a continuing resolution year, I also have a lot of commercial work that I can continue to go pursue. So there's pros and cons, I think, to sort of both approaches.
Well, the DoD
but I don't think you're going to see that much shifting. It's just too hard to shift.
Well, if the DoD isn't buying kamikaze drones, I'm happy to buy them personally for my next hunting trip. Give me the C4. Let's lift the ITAR control rules. Get me the suicide drone. I want to go hunting for some big
Wild
game.
boars.
Thank you, Delian, for coming on. Do you have a last question?
Oh,
we got Jake coming on.
We got another
One
guest
more
coming on, but quick question. Do you think that the deal, without commenting on rippling a deal, do you think that was a wake-up call for the defense industry around, hey, if this is happening in HR tech, like we got to take everything way more seriously, right? Because obviously, people probably, anybody that would be competing with Varda knows who else is like bidding on the contract. It's like common knowledge. It's not the same type of information advantage. But if people are willing to like break the law to steal customer data, CRM data for HR tech, it to me should just be this massive wake up call around, if you're doing anything that's critical to national security, you need to take your own security at your company 10 times more seriously.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at the, sort of SpaceX, the Andurils, the Vardas, the Hadrians, et cetera, on down, the per capita number of like IT security people you basically need on staff because you're just like ITAR compliance, et cetera, means these companies are thinking about it all the time. Now, at the same time, are there like Chinese spies and, foreign spies sniffing around all of these? Almost certainly. Are there other corporate spies sniffing around this all the time? Absolutely. But I do think you see this stuff a bit less in terms of, actually having these like, sort of totally negative effects. Partially because with rippling and deal, it's like, okay, let's pull like which software features, et cetera. When it comes to something like Varda, man, it's like, what would you even pull from our servers to figure out how to do what we do? It's like, you could get this CAD file, this thing, but it's like, you need the supply chain, you need to cut the metal, you got to integrate it, you got to know how to test it, et cetera. It's like, even if you gave me access to our full server base, you gave me a team of like 30 engineers and you tell me go replicate Varda, it would still be like a really hard problem. Like if you look at the, sort of Chinese rockets, they look a hell of a lot like the Falcon 9s. And they're still not landing, right? And so, I think it's clear that like the Chinese definitely ripped a lot of stuff from SpaceX at some point or another. It's really hard to, sort of prevent that from happening. Sort of can't blame, anybody for having that happen to their company. But also the Chinese still aren't landing rockets. Now, their solution has just been, let's build as many rockets as possible and screw it, rather than purposely landing them on barges, we're just going to ditch them over Chinese villages and like, dump propellant on like our, sort of poor villagers. But like, whatever, we're going to set up, the first Chinese lunar base before the Americans because like, we're just willing to murder citizens nonstop on the way to a goal. And, unfortunately for America, we don't, murder our citizens. We only murder our presidents.
Oh, whoa. JFK files. Good deep cut. I love it.
Well, at least we didn't land on the Dolphins yesterday.
Yeah, that's good. The Dolphins seemed like they were good. Let's end on a high note.
Look, maybe the Dolphins work from Assad, though. That's all I'll say.
Maybe.
You never know.
As soon as you get off the
Dolphin tech,
asks
there's some crazy.
What happened on the ISS?
No, there's some crazy NASA lore around dolphins. Don't Google it.
Don't Google it.
But
okay. Well, thank you, Delian. We'll talk to you soon. Have a great one.
Always a good time.
I think we got Jake Adler coming in, the Temple of Technology, in just a few minutes. He is building military medicine, biotech for the next generation soldier. Very
and
exciting.
we got to see if there's some dual use applications for that because we podcast pretty hard.
Yep.
Harder than
if you're
anyone
injured,
else we know.
We're still going live. So let's talk to Jake about it. I believe he's here. Welcome. Come on down. Ooh, the big Celsius. I got the small Celsius mogged.
Cheers.
Cheers, Jake. How you doing?
I'm good. How you guys doing?
Doing fantastic. Can you give us the update? What did you announce? What are you doing? What are you building? What's behind you?
Oh, so behind me is our lab. This is a BSL2, so biosafety level 2 facility. So this is a biosafety cabinet. So we're handling any like pathogens, like any anthrax or botulinum. We're going to be doing it in there,
Cool.
just for protection of the operator. But yeah, so we just announced a $3.25 million round, led by Peter Thiel, Cantos, and Refactor Capital to transform really the battlefield with advanced biotechnology. And really, if we consider like the state of affairs today, military medicine hasn't really changed much since Vietnam. We've seen a little bit of improvement in tactical combat casualty care, but we very much still have warfighters who are going on the front lines and dying in combat. So, what we're trying to build here is really advanced and novel biotechnology that we can really equip warfighters with to make them more lethal, more resilient, and more ready in combat environments. So initially, applications of that look like a nano composite for rapid wound healing, along with something we're exploring with More Intelligence Partners, which is a novel like biosurveillance network that would effectively be able to monitor for biological and chemical threats.
I remember reading about quick clot back in the day. Can you talk to me about the evolution in just wound healing on the battlefield, kind of the different eras and where you see it going with your company?
Yeah, so quick clot is a really, really interesting example. It was started by a guy named Frank Hersey, and they basically, this guy would cut himself when he was shaving, and he realized that this mineral called zeolite, he would pour it on his skin, and it would stop the bleeding.
Yeah.
The challenge with quick clot, at least its initial formulation, was that it used to burn warfighters. So it actually would cause like second or third degree burns. So it would effectively stop the hemorrhage, but it would also burn them in the process of doing that. And they've now transitioned the technology. But really, the issue with the traditional quick clot idea and the concept is that it might have supported warfare in a more traditional context where we can medevac that troop. But military is heading towards, like the military doctrine is heading towards this environment where, troops are going to be deployed in combat for an extended period of time, and military medics, we won't even be able to retract them for maybe upwards of 2 weeks. So, the almost in many ways the definition of what a casualty is changing. It's not somebody who's just been shot and is completely completely gone. It's now somebody who can't even pull the trigger. So what we're trying to explore with Kingsfoil is moving beyond just that initial hemorrhage control and that hemostatic agent and building a product that would actually enable the warfighter to heal faster, so reducing that convalescent period and having them return to duty sooner.
Talk as much as you can about sort of broad, I would call it almost like drug use in the military. I've heard stories of fighter pilots. The funny thing is, from what I know, when F-35 pilots are deploying to the Middle East, they just sort of like take off here in the U.S. and they just fly
right
there. And you can imagine it's a pretty long flight. Anybody that's been on a 16-hour flight to the Middle East,
Pretty
doing
brutal.
a little fundraising, it's you usually want to fall asleep at some point. Adderall and some of these sort of like
Modafinil was the big one.
those types of drugs are obvious. World War II has some crazy examples. Would love to hear the history of like kind of drug use in the military, super abbreviated, everything from like stimulants to stuff more like quick clot.
Yeah. So, the medications you guys mentioned are typically categorized as no and no go. So your stimulants, and then you have like your Z pills or your benzodiazepines to help with drowsiness. And look, it's really interesting. The military is relatively constrained for what they can actually provide to warfighters. I've heard some crazy stories. I think I heard this story about an Air Force a pilot who he basically took a bunch of benzos and he was like unable to fall asleep, so he started taking more and ended up like trying to like go use the bathroom and started like completely pissing himself. So they don't have like a lot of control over, and they don't really I would say they don't really advise how to use them so well. But modafinil is definitely a big one for vigilance and awareness. Obviously, your benzodiazepine class is pretty big as well, although the military is trying to move away from those. So there's quite a broad history here. But really, I don't think pharmacological is necessarily the right or immediate approach. I think in many ways we should be targeting the more of the root causes. So, for example, one of the early technologies we were exploring was a device called NewSleep, which is a closed-loop brain-computer interface that would effectively shock you to sleep. And this has been a really big point of interest for the military is, can we build neuromodulation or brain stimulation devices that can control sleep architecture and make it so when warfighters sleep 3 hours, they really feel like they're sleeping 5 hours, right? So we're trying to find alternatives that are not addictive or habit forming and don't really carry the secondary or next day effects that many benzodiazepines would.
Talk about sort of like dual use applications of sort of stuff on your roadmap, right? I imagine there's some things that you're developing that are going to be so powerful that eventually we'll want to get consumers will be like, hey, we want some of that too, right? And there's a long history of the sort of military.
And aren't you a consumer of this stuff? I see pictures of you testing it yourself.
So whenever we're thinking about a new initiative, my brain immediately goes to the dual use implication. And that's sort of one of the beautiful things we get to do at this intersection of biotech and defense. A lot of the companies today that are getting funded are building like cruise missiles, and you can't really sell that to the consumer or civilian population, right?
John wants some.
I'm really into
drones.
big game hunting, and I want to take it to the next level, move past the sniper rifles and the long guns, and go into the kamikaze drones and the cruise missiles. That's my goal for this year. But I take your point. Yeah. So continue. Sorry.
But yeah, so we're consistently thinking about that dual use implication, and really in many ways I see the DoD and our work with federal partners as a launch pad, right? We kind of get to offload a lot of this initial experimental and financial risk, kind of deployed into this first customer market, and be able to eventually leverage that market for really extreme validation in the most austere conditions, and then bring it back to the civilian market. So practically everything we're building has a dual use implication.
Yep.
And I think another interesting implication as well is that, a lot of technology we're building is potentially maybe too early for the civilian market. So we kind of get that initial footing with a partner who can actually help us build out the technology, provide us with the necessary revenue to grow as a company and really, grow as an organization and grow out our product portfolio, and eventually bring it back to the market when it's the right time for civilians.
How do you, we were just talking to Delian about kind of the continuing resolution and the fact that the DoD isn't adding a lot of new programs. You're obviously still in the early stages here, kind of seed round level. Are you thinking about, hey, let's just go heads down for a couple of years, R&D, and then sprint towards program of record? Or are you seeing there's pockets of money that you can be responsive to and little programs that you can build up very quickly?
Yeah. So we're pretty aggressive with our approach. One of the last conferences we went to present our technology, we got removed by armed security and present to PMs on garbage bins outside the conference center. So we're definitely in the mode of trying to get our technology in the warfighters' hands. That's sort of the chasm we're trying to cross here. Is that if you look at the state of things today, academia rules military medicine, and they do a horrible, totally shitty job of taking technology from the benchtop to the battlefield. So the way we've been approaching things is thinking how can I build something in 4 months that we can then present to a federal partner, get it in the hands of the warfighter, and deploy this rapidly. So QuickClot, which is an example you brought up, got cleared in 9 months with no human trials, right? So there's kind of this really interesting opportunity for us to leverage the DoD and FDA memorandums, which enable expedited approval and clearance. And notably, big companies right now, big startups like Neuralink and Synchron, these big brain-computer interface companies, which have breakthrough designation, which was, prized as the fastest, most expedited pathway in the FDA. If you work with the DoD, you can move faster, right? Sure. So there's this really interesting opportunity for us to build technology and actually get it in the hands of the warfighter and make sure that the troops we're putting in the most austere conditions aren't just surviving, but they're thriving, right? It's really hard to ask a 20-year-old to go into combat without the tools that they need to survive.
I'm curious how much of what you're developing is based on sort of studies that have existed for a long time that just nobody cared about, right? I imagine there's just this treasure trove of information and research that people just never acted on, and now that you sort of this high agency, you have this kind of core thesis for the company. I imagine there's a lot of basically off balance sheet R&D work that you can just kind of absorb and sort of run with.
Yeah. So the first thing I'll mention, I think Palmer actually said this, which is that he hasn't really invented anything new because a lot of these concepts are already in sci-fi, and growing up being a big sci-fi reader, a lot of the ideas I have are coming directly out of science fiction. So rapid wound healing, artificial and synthetic blood, biosurveillance and biodefense. So a lot of these are deeply tied to fiction because of the limited constraints on the reality. But in terms of existing literature, we really do stand on the shoulders of giants. I think my primary skill set has been, how do I take really compelling literature from this one field that has no real practical application and combine it with something else, right? And kind of find these really interesting points of convergence between different ideas and turn that into a practical product, right? So in many ways, we do a really good job at taking, this cutting edge research and perfecting it. And I owe a lot to academia for that. And that's really, in my view, the role academia should be serving, right? Academia should be that foundational, doing that breakthrough science without very much thinking about the translational ability. But then you do need that partner to cross that bridge and actually build technology that can translate and get in the hands of the warfighter. And that's what we're trying to do at Pilgrim.
That makes sense. The Biological Weapons Convention in 1972 said the development, production, acquisition, transfer, stockpiling, and use of biological and toxins are effectively prohibited. So bioweapons are illegal, but that doesn't mean they're not going to be used, right? Do you think the DoD, if I'm a soldier being deployed to some far off land to fight some enemy that I don't know what their sort of ethics are. I don't know if they're going to follow the sort of like laws, right, against these things. Maybe they get super desperate. Do you think that the DoD generally takes these sort of threats seriously enough? And I imagine, a lot of the stuff you're thinking about is reactionary to, a certain situation on the battlefield. How do you make sure that you're keeping our warfighters safe in a sort of unpredictable environment?
Totally. So first off, the DoD has a very kinetic frame of reference. So when they're thinking about things and threats, they're thinking about big, shiny explosions. I always joke with our team that I wish there was more explosions in bio, but there just really isn't. I can't just do like an on-grill demo of an Altius or Fury just like crashing into something. It just doesn't really work that way. So to your point, the DoD's response has been largely reactive. You look at COVID-19, spread across the globe in 9 months, killed like 1.2 million Americans and wiped out 16 trillion in our GDP. It also took off like for 10 weeks. We had an operational gap in the Pacific due to the USS Theodore Roosevelt. So it's very reactionary. So in terms of the Biological Weapons Convention, we should not be at the mercy and trust of other states. The U.S. has a somewhat of a grandstanding policy around this, which is that we will not build bioweapons, and the best offense is really stronger defense. The problem is that we have no defense. So we're kind of in this really precarious position right now where we are very vulnerable to a biological weapon attack. And we've seen that with COVID. We saw that very briefly with H5N1, but that didn't really have a much spillover risk. So even if it's man-made or natural, it's still a threat. So the reality is that most of our foreign adversaries are building out these laboratories. They're building out these weapons. In many ways, these systems tend to be referred to as like poor man nukes because they're a lot cheaper and also don't really respect borders, so they can proliferate a lot faster and don't really require that direct confrontation. So it really underscores a frightening reality where these weapons can be used in really novel ways to really take down and break down the resilience of our military and also the critical infrastructure around the U.S. So even with the Biological Weapons Convention, there still is an outlasting and really real threat that's impeding with these systems.
How do you think about the legacy of Theranos? I'm sure if you're successful, people are going to be like, oh, this dropout, raising all this money, building this stuff. It's tough in bio because obviously there's so many real drugs that make it to market and quietly make billions or trillions of dollars. Novo Nordisk is bigger than the entire GDP of Denmark. But at the same time, it's harder for someone just to like download the app and verify that it's a real thing like they can with a cursor, for example. What's your take on the legacy of Theranos?
So Theranos is obviously a very concerning, or was a very concerning situation. Elizabeth Holmes had basically this ability to keep the FDA out and prevent them, proper inspectors from coming in and checking out their work. And this is actually something I'm seeing again with non-invasive neuromodulation today. A lot of the companies in the space are building brain-computer interfaces and trying to circumvent the Food and Drug Administration by trying to fall into this general wellness category. I've seen like dozens of companies do this. And right now, like they're going to be fine, right? Like they'll get away with it for the time being. But if they hit $1 billion val, they're going to get a horrible enforcement action. Like, at that point, it's fraud, right? So you can even be seeing jail time and you can be seeing massive fines. So it isn't like this cycle has gone away since Theranos. It's still very prominent. One thing that we do at Pilgrim, which is something I've been very adamant about since day one, is that we do that preliminary validation. So if we don't see the results on our benchtop, we don't even bring it to the US government. And the belief there is that we're trying to not only save taxpayer dollars, but also save our time. Like I don't have any interest in working on tech that doesn't work. So I want to see it work for myself. And clearly, if it wasn't clear with the demo I did on myself, I have a pretty high conviction to get to results, right? So on limited time, I had to cut holes in my legs on camera to demonstrate the rapid healing abilities of one of our composites. So that's sort of the approach we've taken. But in terms of Theranos' legacy, it obviously has scarred the biotech industry. I'm pretty bearish on biotech as a whole, which is a pretty hard thing to say being in the industry itself. But I just don't think many companies here are actually thinking about the practical and commercial implications of their work. Many people come in, they'll raise a couple million and buy like hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of equipment and run with that idea, but not actually think about how they're going to make it to the market. And I think that's a really concerning reality when we're thinking about startups, even on that 10 to 15 year timeline.
Have you had any luck finding you have a roll up here called Pathfinder It says, as a Pathfinder, you're the stormtrooper who stares down critical, near impossible challenges. You'll take on missions that break lesser souls, problems with no playbook, trekking into combat zones to deliver our tech, restoring a 90s scanning electron microscope without a manual, crashing a DARPA event with a fake badge to snag intel from top brass. Tasks so wild they'll call you insane. Has it been challenging to find the right person for that?
Transparently, no. We've gotten a lot of really compelling submissions for that. One thing I was very smart to do ahead of the announcement of the company was put like the question as part of the job post. So we've gotten some really interesting information out of people. So when people are, instead of just like submitting a bullshit application, they actually have to spend the time and write something compelling. But we found some really cool people. Like I said, our approach is very much based in guerrilla warfare, right? So we do what it really takes to get the meetings that we need to get. And thus far, it's worked very well in our favor. I think in many ways we're kind of battling a lot of entrenched interests. I somewhat compare, with limited perspective on precisely what it looked like, but I somewhat compare our experience to O5 Palantir, going up against the government, going up against these primes, and really trying to make a name, positioning ourselves in our company. So the Pathfinder role is one that I was really excited by. It really even like fired me up writing it. And we really wanted a stormtrooper who could go on the front lines. I could put them into combat environments and they would just kill it. If we need to get a meeting with SecDef, if we need them to break into a DARPA conference, if they need to go, beyond enemy lines, whatever it may be, we just needed somebody who would basically take the task, and sign off and get it done.
Needed an absolute dog. Well, I
have one more question.
One more question, then I'll cap it off.
Okay, cool. You talked about brain-computer interfaces. We've talked about this in the past. You know the industry very well. I don't know if you saw this, but a couple weeks ago, someone burned something close to like a couple $1 million of Ethereum to encode a message in the blockchain that alleged that China had developed brain-computer interface technology that was being used to control workers like ants. And it was very scary sounding sci-fi. If it's happening, it's terrifying. Why would someone spend so much money? Is this some sort of false flag, just try and freak out the Americans by spending this money? Is it even possible? What's your timeline for that type of thing? The Ender's Game of BCI, controlling all the soldiers on the battlefield. Give us the most sci-fi take you have.
So, notably, first I'll address the China thing. China is beating out the U.S. in patents around neural interfaces. They've been doing that, I think, for a few years now. So they've really taken the lead. China also thrives on this belief of military-civil fusion. So basically, any civilian corporation has a direct inline to the government for military applications. So, it's realistic in many ways that China is going to get there. And also, like I mentioned before, the U.S. maintains a somewhat of a grandstanding approach to bio. So, we've been pretty anti-modification or genetic enhancement of our warfighters for good reasons. But notably, that's going to inhibit our timeline to get to potentially the same outcomes that China might eventually move towards. So in terms of neural interfaces that can control warfighters, it's something I've looked into and something that I've explored. And there's a couple interesting modalities that are still semi or non-invasive. The biggest challenge with neural interfaces is spatial and temporal resolution. So most of the solutions today that rely on like EEG, you have really high temporal resolution. So you see the signal really, really quickly, but you're basically looking at a bowl of soup. It could be with millions of different things mixed in. You don't know precisely where that signal is coming from. And we've been leveraging AI. Like there's been researchers who've been using AI to like isolate it a little bit more, but non-invasive modalities are still pretty unclear. But in terms of a timeline or really approach to build technology that would be able to control the warfighter, it's a lot sooner than you would imagine.
Terrifying.
Amazing.
Well, thanks for breaking it
I'm
down.
glad you're doing what you're doing. Last thing I just want to leave you with, if you're working on anything that would help us do this show 24 hours a day for weeks in a row.
If you can just eliminate sleep entirely, that'd be great.
just get it over here.
We have Celsius, but we're looking for something stronger. Make it happen, Jake.
We're here. We appreciate you dog fooding your product. We'll step up. We're confident.
You can test the craziest stuff pre-FDA. We'll get ITAR compliant. We'll get regulated as a DoD effort if you need to test stuff on us.
Thank you for doing what you do. It's great having you on,
Jake. Thanks for stopping by. We'll talk to you soon.
What an absolute dog.
Wild. Should we move on to the timeline? Close it out.
Yeah, I have a post here
break it down.
that's breaking news.
Oh, yeah?
This was sent right when we started going live. This is from Barrett Ames. He says, "Yo, at TBPN, Ramp just sent us cookies. Talk about customer service.
Oh.
I reached out to them because of y'all, so keep shilling. It's
There we
working."
go. Thank you. Let's hear
And
it.
so we love to see it. Nice work,
Conversion.
Barrett. Nice work, Ramp, on sending. These look like some fantastic cookies. Ramp, when you hear this, we like cookies
send
too.
us some cookies.
John
Just
will
make
eat-
sure
John
it
will
has
eat
no
anything.
carbs and it's all protein. It's actually made out of filet mignon.
Yeah, exactly. Well said.
Anyway, should we move on to Wilmanitis?
Let's do it.
Obscure hobbyist of the year, if you're following our award show last year. He said the end result of vibe coding, $100 million in 30 days, and all this software prosperity gospel junk isn't hundreds of venture scale AI companies. It's just junk food. It's a return to artisanal software that fits right in the hand, distribution passed down over generations.
Amazing.
What a
amazing.
wordsmith. What a wordsmith. We
Yeah,
love
so
Will.
Will's one of those people again, right? He's sort of in that rune category of he should be writing great, novels and
Yes,
texts,
yes,
but
yes.
instead he's just
posting
ripping
bangers.
bangers.
I mean, I've been seeing that there's this whole trend of the levels IO. I just vibe coded a flight simulator. And now a lot of developers are realizing that they can take work that they've already done and spent a lot of time on and been like, I just vibe coded this in a day. And so I saw someone post a website that they designed, and it was like a beautiful website that was so pixel perfect, and like you'd scroll down and you'd go on this crazy 3JS thing, and it was like so complicated, and everyone in the comments was just like, you didn't vibe code this. There's no way. Like, show
no
us
way.
the prompts or it's not.
I
real. I was
love,
like, I gotta hide the secret sauce. Like, my prompt is so good. I was able to build this thing.
Jeremy's comment on that. I long to pay $59.99 for a one-time download of a handcrafted German to-do app.
Absolutely, I'm totally on that.
Yeah,
love
I
it.
could see a return to the one-time purchase model. Like
yeah.
Everything comes in cycles,
Yep,
right?
yep. I'd like that. Well, should we move on to a Ramp employee, Jeff Charles?
Yeah, this is a great post. He has a screenshot of Gemini. He says, make a presentation that summarizes these trends, highlighting key statistics and takeaways. I'm still learning how to create multiple slides at once. Can you describe one slide you want me to create? Okay.
Create one slide with main takeaways. And then
I'm still learning how to create multiple. Oh, I'm sorry. I can't help with creating slides yet, but I'm still learning.
Gemini.
Oh,
come
rough.
on. You have to
Sundar
pay
did
for
not
this
need
stuff.
this.
You have to pay
Yeah,
for
they
this
charge
stuff.
for this product.
Oh, yeah.
right?
This is like $20 a month. And then it just annoys you in every app you're in. Like, hey, wanted to use Gemini? And then it doesn't
Clippy
deliver.
would never do this to you.
No.
It would never make it sound like it could do something. that it
Exactly. Clippy was just there with like fun little positive messages. Like, hey, I'll help you out. Here, have you heard of Control V, Control C? We got it all here in Microsoft Word 95. Anyway, should we move on to Joe Weisenthal? Oh, the post was deleted. Anyway, he was just giving a shout out to bros. He says they love using bros as an epithet. That's sad. I only have warm feelings toward my bros. And this is because there is a new phrase on the timeline, the abundance bros.
Yeah.
This is popularized by Ezra Klein, saying that we need to focus on basically a democratic platform around abundance and building a pro-builder political party. And a lot of people are trying to take him down. Calling him abundance bros. Bernie bros was the same thing. Whenever someone wants to take down something, it's just SaaS bros, tech bros, business bros, finance bros. They throw bros around.
I saw another post that was relevant to this from someone named Grace Freud. She says, "Hi, I'm Ezra Klein. I've spent the past 2 weeks or so thinking about how to fix the world, and I think I have the answer. What if things were good?"
I love it.
But no, I'm pro abundance.
I mean,
it's easy to rally around.
Yeah, we don't really talk about politics here, but like Ezra Klein is on the vanguard of a significant shift politically. Where if you read his book or you listen to his YouTube video breaking it down, it sounds very, very different from anything we've heard from his camp over the last few years. So I don't know. Check it out if you're into politics, but there's other podcasts for that. So
There certainly are.
unsubscribe from us. If
We
you
got a
wanna listen to
post
that.
from Patio 11, aka
Okay.
Patrick McKenzie. He says, so Atlantic came out with this new article that said there are two kinds of credit cards. Yet another way the poor are subsidizing the rich. The credit card market is quietly transformed into two credit card markets, one offering generous benefits to wealthy Americans and the other offering expensive debt to the poor, with the latter subsidizing the former. And so he's Patrick.
Piece on credit cards.
Yeah, so Patrick says the thesis is that interchange fees redistribute money from poor to rich. I do not subscribe to this thesis. So he's obviously
put him in the truth zone.
Yeah, you got to put this one in the truth zone. I mean, credit cards take fees from payment processors when they swipe a card.
Yep.
Because they're taking on some amount of risk related to that transaction. And
I would love to hear
the credit card companies pass some of that back to
the people that
pay them off. And if you really want the best rewards, just constantly switch credit cards and debit cards and just always use the latest neobank that's offering you 5% cash back or a 10% Bitcoin match, whatever it is.
We should have him on the show because I want to hear his thesis, because I've talked to consultants and kind of investors who have looked at consumer credit card products, and they've basically said that, you know, that is the business model. Like revolvers are the way, like revolvers, people that revolve the debt and actually they collect interest on. And then there's a whole cohort that they never make any money on. And that's kind of always been the business model.
Yeah.
And so I wonder,
well, you can still make money on the people just from the spread between the interchange fee and what gets passed.
And I guess
rewards.
I guess it's not redistributive in the sense that like the rich person is still generating a lot of money for the credit card companies. It's like
that's what I'm
the
saying.
credit card companies making a lot of money on everyone and probably more money on the rich person.
Turns out it's a good business.
This was an interesting post by Tyler Hudgy. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce that, but he says the venture capital Mount Rushmore. Ready? Arthur Rock, Don Valentine, John Doerr, and for many years
Arthur Rock, the anonymous poster. Kidding.
Don Valentine, the creator of Valentine's Day?
Yeah. By the way, you made that joke and like 10
flopped.
I don't even know if 10 people got it.
No.
I don't know if anybody got the joke.
I don't think he's that iconic of an image.
I thought it was funny.
Yeah, well, we scheduled that one like months ahead, and it went out, and it was a complete flop. Anyway, and for many years, he couldn't pick a fourth. Today, he's calling it Doug Leone. And then a lot of people in the comments are saying Paul Graham, Jessica Livingston, Khosla, Teal, Moritz are all interesting. I wanted to go back and look through who wrote the seed checks into the hyperscalers, the Mag 7. I thought this was an interesting thing, and I wanted to go through it really quickly. Apple had Mike Markula, who did not become a large venture capital firm. So he kind of doesn't count as a generational VC, even though obviously he invested $92,000 plus the secured credit line, made a huge amount of money. And interestingly, he was introduced to Apple through Don Valentine and Arthur Rock. So literally every major company went through them. Microsoft had David Marquette of Technology Venture Investors, got $1 million for a 5% stake. And when you talk to David Senra, he's like, oh, Microsoft didn't raise venture capital because they didn't really do more than that. They only did one VC round. And of course, TVI did not go on to become like a big generational firm. Amazon, Jeff Bezos' family came in, but they had other angel investors, and later Kleiner Perkins came in. Andy Bechtolsheim at Google. There's a lot of folks that, like, the early rounds of these Mag 7 were just kind of like random people that never fully scaled up. Like, you even look at Meta.
They just became post-economic too fast.
Basically.
They lost the dog in them.
Of course, with Google, Sequoia and Kleiner Perkins eventually came in very, very early and got huge stakes. Meta, formerly Facebook, Teal put in $500K on a convertible note, which converted to 10% equity stake, and then he turned it into Founders Fund. Tesla, Elon Musk, you can kind of think of the first investor, but then Sequoia and Kleiner came in, of course.
Right.
And then Tesla with Elon Musk, and then Nvidia, Sequoia Capital again. So just some generational firms putting up big numbers, the holy trinity for a reason. It's crazy to think about, investing in Apple or Microsoft and then just being like, yeah, I'm not going to raise a massive growth fund.
Yeah.
Like, it's a different era. Now, the LPs would be beating down your door.
Yeah.
If you had 10% of a $1 trillion company. But anyway, should we move on to this robot? Do we have this video pulled up? Can we play this?
Oh, Boston Dynamics wants to do another demo.
Oh no.
The demo, bro. No. Okay.
Let's do Mads posting first while Ben tries to pull that up. Mads posting. Science Girl says, what massively improved your mental health? And Mads is sharing a picture of a book. Caller, I'd like to know how you handle your stress. Trump, I try and tell myself it doesn't matter. Nothing matters. If you tell yourself it doesn't matter, like you do shows, if you do this, you do that, and then you have earthquakes in India where 400,000 people get killed. Honestly, it doesn't matter. What a bizarre quote. Yeah, that just sounds like a ramble. I don't even get it.
I think there's some more context here. I remember when this was first shared, it was during the height of the
People love
drama
it.
and the
32K likes.
election and everything like that. And I think this is a good and bad philosophy.
It's very
If you're
nihilistic.
if you're dealing with problems,
Yeah.
you want to sort of detach from them and understand, like, okay, this is frustrating, or I'm not happy with the situation.
Yeah.
I need to resolve it. But you can sort of detach and look at it from a different perspective and say, there's still a lot of good things in life, and this one thing doesn't make everything else bad.
Yeah.
And
Is he a nothing ever happens guy? This feels very nothing ever happens coded.
maybe we should ask him when he comes on the show.
Yes.
After
only if
he's
he's talking
done-
about his business.
No, I'm saying after.
Yeah, after he gets done with all his politics side quest,
if he
goes back to just building social networking and crypto technology.
That's right. Ben, do we have a video?
Hey, we got it.
There we go.
Looks like a normal Boston Dynamics demo.
All right,
Is it gonna
let's see it do a
dance?
kickflip.
Oh, it's running. Okay. Pretty impressive. Kneeling. Okay. Oh, wow. Crawling. Not bad. This is pretty good. I'm excited. I still don't understand what's going on with Boston Dynamics because, Unitree is getting all the attention now. Wow. Okay.
That's cool.
That's pretty good.
I like that.
I like that.
Anytime you're going vertical, doing flips.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Wow, okay, breakdancing. That's pretty good. This
So
is
there's
impressive.
a human in the suit, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, honestly, the robots
Whoa.
look so crazy. It's so easy to think like this is CGI, this is AI generated, but wow,
There we go.
okay, doing some breakdancing. That's
Interesting
pretty
to
solid.
start with a very unimpressive.
Oh, okay, that's
Okay.
getting really, really good. Wow, very interesting. I'm really wondering when is Boston Dynamics going to get more aggressive about the commercialization? Like they're not in the conversation at all.
Yeah, you called this the best marketing strategy for any robotics company is to figure out a way to make 10,000 of them and just march them across a field.
Yep. That would be very intimidating to anyone, and there'd
I
probably be
would-
a program of record the next day.
I would try to lead their round.
Yes.
I would get all the
I
group chats
recently
together and I'd
said
say-
there's a lot of companies working on counter UAS technology. You're invested in a company, Allen Control Systems, gun on a truck, right?
Yeah.
And they can demolish DJI drones if they were coming to attack. And those drone light shows, we now have counter to that. We have Anduril's Anvil. We have
Neros.
electronics
Drones
systems.
are good for
Drones
counter
against
drone.
drones. I've even seen
Drone on
eagles
drone
be
action.
used to capture drones, nets, all sorts of stuff, shotguns.
Beagles, hunting
But
dogs.
I have yet to see a company build counter humanoid technology.
Yeah.
I think it's just a gun, but I want to see it
A
in a
ThinkPad
demo.
gun?
I want to see a Gundo defense tech company just showing, a minigun just spitting out 1,000 rounds at a horde of Unitrees.
There's this thing, I don't think you've ever seen it, but where two guys get in an octagon and they fight.
Oh,
And you could imagine a world where we take some of our best MMA athletes.
that's the
and we have
United Fisticuffs Championship, right?
Yeah. It's not mixed martial arts. It's Muscle Man Attack.
Muscle Man Attack.
You called it.
Muscle Man Attacks.
And you could imagine a world where we just take our UFC champions and face them off against the humanoids
The
and
Boston
and,
Dynamics.
And that's the final boss.
The
Really
final
is-
boss. Anyway.
Can you could a humanoid take out a
Bo
John
Nickel?
Jones in his prime? Bo Nickel today.
I think Bo Nickel makes short work of that Boston Dynamics
Oh yeah,
robot. No
oh yeah,
problem.
rear naked choke.
Naked joke on that. I don't know. I mean, that robot seemed like you could just flip around and just grab him. But
The hard thing is you
I
can't.
think it's more like a strike to the head. A foot to the head really does it in. Kick it over. Who
Maybe
knows?
it's kind of crazy. How do you submit a robot? You can break their arm, and the rest of them is still.
Yeah, it's going to be tricky.
Yeah, our producer Ben is a former almost champion of a jiu-jitsu tournament recently.
Okay.
Go for number one, Ben.
Well, let's move on to Chet.
Yeah, Chet.
No
so,
Cap Capital.
Yeah, so this is a good one. I've heard this before. I just wanted to highlight it again as a word. If you're running a city, don't do this. Just learned about how Chicago sold the rights to all of its parking meter revenue to the UAE for $1.1 billion in 2008. The city is currently collecting $150 million a year and growing in parking meter fees, and sends it straight to Dubai until 2083.
Not a good inflation hedge, but maybe they put that 1.1 billion in some high growth asset, and it's now sitting at 20 billion. You know, they could be outpacing the inflation. We don't know what they did with the money.
That's
Probably
rough.
just did nothing with it, though. Let's be honest. Anyway, Sam Rudikoff says, my dad uses these speakers to watch MSNBC. And this is what we expect our future to be. When you're enjoying TBPN Live, throw it on a TV, but get some nice speakers. Get some bass in there. We record
audio.
with nice microphones.
The ideal way to listen is through sort of handcrafted European, very artisanal speakers where the maker makes one or two of them a year.
Exactly. And
it's sort of like a 30-year waiting list. So get on the waiting list.
It's fantastic. And get a nice recliner to sit there and watch us. What else should we cover before we wrap up? What's interesting to you? Do you want to do Carp Madness? Palantir? This is kind of an interesting one. Eliano Eunice over at Palantir has created a March Madness bracket for the greatest Dr. Carp moments, the infamous sound bites, cockroach holder, steak dinners, self-pleasuring, rusty crusty, don't play golf, fake religion, Coke short sellers, AI revolution. And he posts all the different video clips. And you can go and vote on this post
crazy.
And have a lot of fun picking the best carp soundbite, the most electric carp soundbite, the player haters, the PowerPoint, the Motel 6. They're all great clips, and Eliano has done the great job of collecting them, so go and figure it out.
I have one more post from Steven Schwartz over at WAP. So Arthur Rock posted 24 hours ago, WAP just crossed $90 million run rate and closed an unannounced Series B at $800 million from Bain Capital. Congrats. And then Stevens quotes it and says, this is nearly 1 year old news. Sorry we hadn't told anybody yet. WAP has grown significantly since then, and we have enormous plans for the rest of the year. So totally sleeper company.
Yeah.
We should have them on. I mean, I don't fully understand. They run sort of a Substack-esque platform that helps people sell like information products. From what
I call it the Make Money app.
Great name. And yeah, we should have the founders on to talk about it. I remember they reached out to about PMF or Die when we got started. But very cool. They have like live streaming functionality, like a bunch of stuff. So sleeper company, excited to have them on at some point.
And congrats to Steven Schwartz on the round. You got to announce the next one with us. Come on the show.
Do it.
Don't let Arthur Rock leak stuff. Leak it here. Take
Give us
control.
a scoop.
Go direct.
We love scoops.
We love scoops.
As much as John loves scooping his protein powder, we like
scoops.
And
we don't like leaks. It's very disrespectful. Stop leaking numbers, folks.
Never leak. We will never leak your fundraise.
We will never leak.
What we will do, though, is say thank you to Ramp, Public, AdQuick, 8 Sleep, Wander, and Bezel for their support of the show. Thank you all for the support of the show, for supporting the show. We love doing this, and I can't wait for tomorrow.
I can't wait for the next one. I was going to say the same thing. It's 21 hours away, and you got to really
I wonder if we could commission Jake over at Pilgrim to develop just like the sort of call it like podcast alpha, that Joe Rogan had alpha brain.
Yeah.
If we could develop like our own proprietary drug and then not release it to the world just so that we have
or some sort of drug that just as soon as the camera stopped rolling, it just puts me to sleep in hibernation, and then I just wake up 24 hours later. Welcome to TBPN Live. That would be ideal, so I don't have to spend a minute away from the show.
Guys, we're moving to a new studio soon, and we're actually just gonna set up our mics on our 8 Sleeps right here. So the second the camera goes off, we just kind of go.
Yep, that's great. Anyway, thank you for watching. Thank you.
We will see you tomorrow.
We'll see you tomorrow.
Go leave us 5 stars on Apple and Spotify. We've been climbing up the charts, by the way.
The charts.
We're
Thank you to everyone. Seriously, if you've subscribed, if you've listened on any of those platforms, it's really cool and really awesome to see. We really appreciate it.
The score takes care of itself.
Truly.
No, but thank you all for being a part of this, and we will see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.